Well, welcome everybody. It is episode 12 and my god, it is hot. It is absolutely boiling.
It's tropical.
Oh mate, this is really stifling hot, uncomfortably hot, isn't it? We're both just used to do it down the lake, haven't we, again, and we've both flicked a rod out and would you believe it, one's gone off already.
Yeah, 10 seconds I reckon. We thought it'd be really good, put a rod out, opportunity actually to get a take on tape while we're recording this, because obviously trying to engineer that at times, especially on some of the lakes we fish, is just not easy. So, but would you believe it? We were thinking just press record. No, 10 seconds had gone past, and the rod's almost gone off on the hand, didn't it?
Absolutely, mate. So it was lovely. Yeah, nice mid double.
Yeah,
very feisty male fish. So a bit of wind's just picked up now, and there's a lovely southwesterly coming into the corner where we're fishing. So we anticipate probably a few more fish, to be fair, in the area. So
you never know. But knowing our luck, we've tried to do this before to try and get a take. Live for take, mate. Knowing our luck, it just won't happen.
No, exactly.
Can't never read the script, do they?
No, very true. If you just wondered about my voice, I've lost my. Well, I haven't lost my voice. I've got a bit of a cold. But I'll come on to that a bit later. So yeah, apologies, my voice is a bit more deeper.
It makes a change, mate.
Probably improvement, to be fair. Probably improvement.
Usually it's me with hay fever, so it's quite nice to hear you all snuffled up and struggling for a bit.
Yeah. But
I'm sat in my pants. I know that. I'm soaking wet. I've got bites all over my legs because we've actually this morning, just before we press record, been planting some of your favourite lilies in the lake, haven't we?
Yeah, we've got the old dwarf lilies. Friend of mine, Martin Rosier, dropped a few of them up. He's got a little sauce. Oh, there's a bite! Oh my god! Go on, Michael! Now that is an absolute screamer. All right? Yeah?
Yeah, we're in.
Good man. Well, that didn't take long. It looks like I have got the duffer swim.
You chose first.
I know, I chose first as well. Oh no. I put my rod out and there was literally like 5 or 6 fish around sort of the area, and I thought this is going to go straight away, and Mike's then had to go with second best and literally flick the rod out just from where we were recording, and he's had 2 takes in literally a minute, 2 minutes. So I better give him a hand.
Keep recording, mate. I'm alright.
Yeah, you okay?
Yeah, I'm alright.
Give us a shout when it's a little closer. Have you got your net and that there?
Yeah, I got it all.
Okay, good man. Is it a good fish?
I have no idea.
Right, okay. Well, I'll probably dive off to have a look and see what one it is. Nothing else. I don't know if it's. There's quite a few small fish in the shallows, as you'd expect. It's very warm and 2-3 foot, and you always get those males that hang around the shallows, regardless of the weather. But particularly when you get a bit of warmth, because they think that there may be the odd female left that hasn't spawned. So there's a few of those in the vicinity. So we'll see what he's got. But yeah, good fish. Ooh, that's good. Sounds good. It's a good one. So I might have to sign off in a second, but I'll just watch what happens. Nice to get a take on the podcast. First official one, I think. I can hear it sloshing about in the waves there. I might use a little bit of pellet, little PVA bag, nice and simple, tiny little hook bait, and just flicked it out into the windward corner. Little handful of pellet at the top, nice and easy, really easy. Hey, good man.
Lovely scaly one.
Is it? Nice scaly one, beautiful. Let's get the mat ready. Hang on a sec. 2 seconds.
Good?
Yeah, all good, mate. Mat's all ready. It's literally right next to where we're recording. Pull that there. Wow, I could hear that thrashing about. Giving Mike some trouble down there. Oh, Mike's just making sure the fish is sort of head down in the net, tail's sort of slightly coming up on an angle. Obviously, then the pressure's downwards on the head, and all the fins are nice and flush. Good practice, especially when you're walking up steep banks and that, and obviously making sure his rod's either taking the hook out now or always making sure the rod's out of the way as well. So here he comes. Oh yes, mate, look at that. That's a belter.
Oh,
Wow.
look at him.
Mate, that's the, let's have a look. I'm trying to recognise which fish it is.
Oh yeah.
That's lovely, mate. Look at that.
Look at that.
Wow.
It's absolutely covered
Mate,
in
that's
huge scales.
huge plates all over it. That's a corker, mate.
Have a quick pick then, mate.
Yeah, mate.
Next to the
Let's see old monitor.
Yeah.
Which way? From here?
come down there, mate.
Right. I've just recognised which fish it is. They're very similar, that little batch, but that's Jesus.
Oh, lovely.
And there's an epic story to go with that one.
Well, let's cover that off in a minute.
Yeah, mate.
Let's put him back.
Yeah.
In fact, I might leave my rod in. Not in the water.
If you look at his nose, Mike.
Yeah,
on
it's
this
got.
side, it's sort of shunted on this
That's
side.
it, you've got it.
That's it, mate.
That's him.
Wicked.
Okay, let me put him back.
Good. Yeah. Last night, 20-ish, like 3 years ago.
Right. Okay.
Well, there you go. Wow. Good man, Michael. Was he about 22, 23?
Yeah, he felt up there, Mark. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to leave that rod in for a bit, otherwise we're not going to get anything done here, are we?
Yeah.
Um.
No. Well, not your hot spot. He's been baiting. I reckon you've been coming down and putting bait in, Mike, yeah?
No, I haven't.
Hey?
No, not at all.
2 bites in like what? Under 2 minutes? 10 minutes? I don't know.
10 minutes.
My Christ.
Oh, and we're back. Sorry about that.
Mate, no, don't be sorry,
I'm
mate.
absolutely covered in silt.
Mate, you've just picked the worst foot attire flip-flops. Havanas, we're trying to fish in Havanas, mate.
Oh.
We're walking down a slope into silt.
Yeah, I had a set of Havanas on, and yeah, once they've gone in the silt, it's like a suction pad.
Yeah,
so I've lost
yeah.
them about 3 or 4 times, and oh yeah, I'm absolutely covered in bites. But where were we? So yeah, might as well start with that. That was a lovely scaly sort of low 20. But you got a good story with that one?
Yeah, mate. I was looking in it, and there's quite a few. There's a few fish that are similar in the scale patterns here, and that was one of them. And that could have, on one side it looks like 3 or 4 different fish, but as soon as you flipped them over, I thought that's the double row, and I thought no, it can't be the double row, because I looked at the head, and then suddenly I saw the slight shunt on the mouth.
Yeah.
Flattened, like it's been punched.
Yeah,
but it's
got a little bit of
discreet.
that.
It's not grossly grotesque, but it's just obviously. So anyway, going on to the story. So yeah, I picked some fish up. This must have been 6-7 years ago, something like that. And I'd picked them up late at night, and I've gone back to my my unit, which was then over in Preston. It was quite a small unit, but I had a massive fish tank.
I remember that.
Yeah.
It was huge. How big was it? Like,
Yeah,
like 10 foot?
No, it wasn't as big as that. It was 6 foot by 6 by 3 by 2, I think, something
Okay.
like that. But a good, it's a massive volume of water. And Scotty come up and helped me set it up, and obviously you're dying to get some fish in there. So anyway, I picked up some fish, and there was 3 that went in there. And I've gone back late at night, put them in the tank. Thought happy days, got some tank fish now, and I'll go and check them in the morning. Well, anyway, my missus was working rolling bait actually for me at the time.
Oh, crikey.
And she's gone
That's how
in.
you wooed her.
Yeah, that's it, exactly. Crikey.
Yeah, come roll some bait for me, love.
She was good like that. Well, she still is, to be fair. But she went in early. I said I've got some fish in the tank, so I've come in a bit later. I can't remember why. I think I had to sort the dog out or something. So I've walked in, and then suddenly I've looked in the as I've come into work. It's been about sort of 9 o'clock, 8:30. I see there's 2 fish in the tank, and I'm thinking, 2? I'm sure I put 3 in there. So I sort of didn't think anything of. Well, I sort of thought, was it 2? Yeah, it might have been 2. It was all obviously a bit late and everything. So I've gone to work, and as I'm sort of cracking eggs for the bait roll to be rolled that day, I'm thinking it was definitely 3. There's definitely 3 fish. So I've weighed them. So I looked at my phone and seen the weight. I thought, right, oh my god, what's happened here? So I've gone round and I've looked in the tank. Definitely 2 fish there. Obviously a bit scatty because they're new.
Yeah.
But then there was learnt a very valuable lesson here. I'd put like a bit of cardboard over the top of the tank just to stop them jumping out, which I thought would stop them.
Yeah.
But of course, when they go into a new environment, the first thing they'll do is jump out. And so I'm looking around on the unit floor. I'm thinking, oh, where's this fish? This fish is dead, but it's probably happened in the first hour.
Yeah.
And it's dead. And I've looked round by the one side of the tank, can't see it. Look by the other side of the tank, and there's like a load of boxes. And down between these boxes, I can see part of a tail. And I'm like, oh no. So I've moved the boxes away, and lo and behold, there's a fish, the best looking one, really scaly. And I've just to wind the story back, I've picked this fish out of hundreds and hundreds of fish. I've gone down and I've took my time and picked this fish.
It's got the length, it's got the scales, it's got
mate.
The looks, hasn't it? You can see it's going to be a very, it's already a cracking fish now, but it's destined for good things, isn't it?
It is, mate. It is. It's just a lovely, lovely fish, and I'm just so I see this fish on the floor, and I'm like, oh no, I've killed it. It's dead. No, that's it.
Jumped out the tank.
Yeah, jumps out the tank. Landed face first on a concrete floor, and then and that was it.
Why I'm laughing?
Yeah, well, I was just thought, poor fish. What a way to go! Like,
how high up was the tank?
Oh, the tank's the top of the tank was 5 foot. Yeah, at least 5 foot. So when I stood against it, I'm sort of putting my nose on the top of the rim of the tank. So it's a long way. It's a long way straight onto a concrete floor. So I'm looking at this fish. I'm thinking, what a nightmare! I'm gutted, like the two fish in there left were lovely fish, but this one was the one. So I was like, oh right, okay, let's get a plastic bag, let's put it in the bin or get rid of it. So I've gone to pick it up, and I can't pick it up because it's dried to the concrete. It's literally all the scales have dried to the concrete, and I'm like, oh no, the top of the fish is dry, obviously, which is facing me, but the bottom bit is tacky and stuck. And I'm trying to lift it, and these scales are going. I'm like, oh no, I'm gonna have to get some water to chuck it under to prise this fish up. So I've got some water, and I've come back to ease the fish out. I don't know why, I should have just ripped it up like a band-aid. But when I've gone back, I've noticed the gill on the fish has moved ever so slightly, and I'm thinking, that's definitely moved. Is that just took a breath? I'm thinking, no, I'm just seeing things. But I thought, right, I put some water over the fish, chuck some water, put it over the gills and everything, and lo and behold, it's moved again. And I'm like, I don't believe it, this fish is still alive. So I've chucked water underneath the underside of the fish, and as I'm doing it gently, I can pull up, and the scales going.
It sounds painful,
yeah,
isn't it?
The scales have been lifted off the fish, so I think they're all going to come off anyway. And anyway, I've managed to get this fish in my hands, and this fish is only about £1.5 £2. And I've put loads of water on it, and I thought, well, what am I going to do? I'm just going to put it straight back in the tank. So I put it in the tank, and it's literally upside down in my tank, and all the other fish are just swimming around it, and it's in all intents and purposes, it looks dead. And I'm just thinking, there is no way this fish is ever coming back to life. And I've just left it, and I've put the aerator next to it, and I thought, well, it's got a chance on it. It's got a chance.
Yeah.
So I've carried on rolling bait, glanced back every sort of 20 minutes, and still in the same position where I left it. I'm thinking,
upside down.
Yeah, upside down. It's in a corner where obviously the vortex of all the disturbance of the pump and all that is a little dead spot. It's just in there upside down, not moving at all. And I'm thinking, well, I've sort of forgotten about it, absolutely forgotten about it. Rolling bait, it gets to about 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, and I've finished. Once you're making bait, especially on them, I was on hand tables, so you're fully committed. You can't have no distractions during a bit of a process. So anyway, I finished my last mix for that morning, and I thought I'm gonna have something to eat. I've looked round, and I can see that fish now. I can see the gills starting to flare and breathe, and I'm thinking, I don't believe it. It's alive. It's alive. So I've had my sandwiches, and I'm watching this fish, and I can see the gill moving very slowly, but it's still moving. And I'm thinking, I can't believe this fish is still alive. I might have to knock it on the head, because they can suffer brain damage, all sorts, being lack of oxygen like we do,
How long do you think it'd been out of that tank?
I reckon it would have happened fairly quickly when it went in there, because the first thing they do in the first hour, they're just hell bent on getting out.
Yeah, they're a bit scatty, aren't they?
They are scatty. It could have happened an hour before my missus got there. I don't know. I like to think it happened.
So worst case scenario, it could have been how long?
Worst case scenario, it could have been on the deck for probably 2 hours.
Oh, wow,
say.
okay.
Hour and a half, 2 hours before I got in and saw it. That's best case scenario. Worst case scenario, it would have been in there since 10 o'clock the following day. So what's that? That would be 12 hours.
Never.
I don't know,
how
mate.
dry it is, it's a bit strange.
Yeah, with the dryness and that, I've known fish that have been transported in wet sacks before. As long as their gills are wet, they can still breathe through their skin. It's not ideal, but they can. It can be done.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but I suppose for the story's purposes, let's say it jumped out as soon as I put it in there. But
Yeah.
I don't know, but it's nice not knowing in some way. So anyway, this fish is breathing, and I'm thinking, I can't believe it. So I think I rang Scotty and just asked him what to do, and he was like, well, it's got a chance, it might come, and I think he was up for knocking it on the head, because it probably had brain damage or internal damage that you won't know about, and it probably live for a year.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's by the end of the day, it's righted itself, and it's not free swimming, but it's righted itself, balance, and it's breathing. And I'm thinking, I can't believe it. This is amazing. I left the unit that day, obviously secured the top of the tank, come back the next day in the morning, and it's swimming around like nothing's happened. Loads of scales missing, loads of blood on, like loads of scars where it's jumped out and that, and its front of its face has been shunted where it's obviously landed, dropped out 5 foot, landed straight onto concrete on its nose on one side of its face.
A bit like a boxer.
Exactly like a boxer, yeah.
Ironically though, we'll talk about it's grown up a bit now, but
yeah.
I didn't notice that.
I
That's
noticed
changed, isn't it?
Yeah, you won't notice it. You only notice it from one side.
Yeah.
And it's when you turn the fish over, I saw it straight. I was like, bloody hell, because the fish is when the fish protrudes its mouth, it's got that little knobbly bit at the top, which is usually dead centre, isn't it?
Yeah.
It goes over a knobbly bit. Yeah. Well, that's like shunted right, like way over right as well. It's like a boxer's had a broken nose. It's just like that. So when it feeds, you see this thing on the side go like that.
So what? So we swim around in a tank by now.
Yeah.
And what happened then?
Well, it was absolutely fine. I boshed a load of salt in the tank to help the healing process. Talked to Scotty about it, and he just said, well, they're amazing things, Carp, it might be okay. So anyway, it lived in my tank then for a further 2.5 years, and it got up to about 4 pound in size, the rest with along with the others. And it was at the time when I took over this lake in 2009, and there was no fish in here at all. And I was thinking, oh, what a lovely place to go and put this fish, because it's obviously had a hard life, and I can obviously secure it with a fence. So I put it in here with the other fish as well. There was another 2 others that went in, and it was one of the first fish in here. And then just sort of disappeared. And later in that year, because there's only a few carp in here, I used to walk the dog around here every day. It got picked up by a cormorant that year.
Oh no!
Which is only 3.5, 4 pounds. So it had like a big white scar on it. I was thinking, oh, what? This poor fish has gone through hell, absolute hell. And then we didn't see it, and that was it. And I thought, it's probably died from the cormorant. And then lo and behold, 7 years later, out it popped, 17 pound, with that telltale sort of nose, which has been pushed over to the side on the mouth. And it's doing really well. It hasn't done many captures. I've caught it once. I think I know of 4 captures in the lake in nearly 9 years now. I think yours is the 5th.
Wow.
And there it is, mate. It's not a massive fish. It's not going to grow huge. It's a male, but it's probably we didn't weigh it, but it's probably 22.
Yeah,
23.
22, 23 pound. But what a carp,
I know, it's amazing.
It was this long. It's just such a long fish. It had big plated scales all along its flank, and it's I didn't notice that. It's almost like grown into its nose a bit. Yeah.
You won't notice it because it's not like hook damage where you get loads of scars and that. This just looks like a deformity.
And you've named it?
I've named it Jesus.
Jesus.
Very aptly, mate, because it came back obviously from death's door. Well, death probably. So amazing, mate. I'm so happy to have seen that fish today, because it's just brings up loads of old memories of all my old bait making stuff and that. And hopefully it'll have a long and lovely life, and a safe one in here as well. Now it's grown past the predation stage of birds and cormorants, and of course all the otters as well. So
mate, what a lovely tale. We're expecting to get that on tape.
No, mate. Well, there you go. It's you just never know, mate. Do you? It's what can come up in fishing. It could have been any fish, and it was that one. What a story that is.
Oh, mate, that's brilliant. It's kind of knocked us off our train of thought a little bit, hasn't it? I mean,
it has. Yeah.
But what a lovely story. I'm pleased we did that.
Yeah, mate. It's a lovely thing. We've got a couple of pictures of it, haven't we? We'll put that on our social media. I'm sure you will, mate.
Well, I'm holding a carp with an unhooking mat underneath the Tascam mic with 2 chairs where we're sat recording the podcast. It looks like an outdoor office, but it's been interrupted by a scaly carp. Yeah, it's quite unusual, but hopefully you'll get to see it.
Mate, I know your rod's not gone back out there because we'd never get anything done here.
Well, I reckon you've got a dodgy rig.
I reckon you're right, mate. I didn't check the hook point when I put it out. I reckon I've been sabotaged.
Definitely. Well, it's just to say we're shading in the bough of a willow. Is that right? I haven't got my glasses. A willow.
Yeah, it's a weeping willow, that one. Yeah.
Yeah, we've got a little bit of shade here, so while that sun doesn't get too hot, we'll crack on, haven't we? But before we do that, we were talking about you've had a swim, haven't you?
Yeah, mate. As soon as we got here, it was so hot. Just had to get in the water, and I was. I think when we got interrupted, I was planting my favourite lily, which is dwarf lilies, which we got off a guy called Martin Rosier. He's got a friend who's got a pond full of them. So we grabbed those, and I planted them around the lake, and they're just a tiny, tiny little lily about the size of a, I don't know, like a...
It's like a little smaller than that, aren't they? I was going to say.
Like a 50p piece almost, some of them. They're really small, really tiny, and they they just set, in the margins. The fish love them as well. You can fish through them. They snap very easily with line, so they're just an all-round great lily to have in the pond. So most opportunities, if I get those lilies brought up to the lake, I'm out in the pond putting them in the water, and today was the perfect excuse to get wet, because Christ, it's been well, it still is now, isn't it? It's roasting, mate. It's
you
so
never
hot.
need an excuse to get wet. Like I said to Mark, I'm going to meet you at the lake. This is the time. I'll get lunch on the way. There's a theme here. If you listen to this regularly, I seem to be the food provider. So I got lunch on the way. For a change, we haven't got any tea, Mark, have we?
No.
Even it's too hot for you to have an Earl today, isn't it?
Yeah, mate. Do you know what? I was contemplating, could I bring like ice down and we could have an iced coffee or iced tea? That would be nice, wouldn't it?
Oh, that sounds beautiful. Yeah. But I said I'll arrange to meet him at 10:30. We'll crack on with the podcast before it gets too hot. So I rock up. He's already in his pants, and it looking like some sort of Cotswold Adonis, just about to take a dip with like a bucket full of lilies. And I lost you then for about an hour and a half, didn't I?
Yeah, that's
You're gone. You're in there. You're doing your thing.
Yeah,
and you were planting your lilies and having a whale of a time.
Oh, mate, it's lovely in the water, is it? This time of year, it's the clear gravel pits. We had fish coming up. You come out with your phone, didn't you, and took a couple of pictures, and there was fish coming right up to us, just inquisitive, interested in what was going on.
Yeah,
it was awesome to see.
They were coming, actually making a bit of noise, and this is interesting. Actually, we'll talk about this now, because making a bit of noise, and Scotty talks about this quite a lot. And when we talk about fish behaviour, is that carp are definitely attracted by noise in the water.
Yeah.
Like when they eat and when they eat certain types of food, obviously that crunching. I spoke to Scotty about it recently, and he's got many observations, like we all have really. As soon as those fish start crunching and one fish is on the spot, it brings other fish in.
Yeah.
And it was with you sort of making a bit of a noise on the bottom, sort of planting those lilies, sticking your thumb in the clay and sort of making little holes. It was amazing. Within no time at all, they kind of almost like the fish. Bear in mind, these are fish that get fished for. They are on guard.
It's open, isn't it?
It's open, yeah. People can fish now.
Yeah.
They were swarming round you like a bit of a herring ball, these carp, weren't
they? Yeah.
Really inquisitive and coming right up. And in fact, one came between me and you.
Yeah, it was amazing. Yeah. In literally 2.5 foot of water, 3 foot of water.
Yeah, and that must just be their inquisitive nature taking over their fight or flight.
It is. I see it a lot on waters like and on the Cotswold water park, particularly where it's gin clear, in the cloudy waters, you'd never know, would you? You'd never know that there was a carp 5 yards from you.
No.
But on these waters and that, you just see them come in, and they're just inquisitive. It's great to see for the carp for what they are, and see what you can get away with, really.
You've done a lot of swimming with them, haven't you?
Yeah, I've done a hell of a lot of swimming. It's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. You really get to see and experience the carps. All of them have different personalities, from ones that are very bold and very forward and will come up and have a look and then literally circle you, to others that will see you from 10 yards away and you get a glimpse of them and they're gone and you don't see them again, and you get everything in between. So it's it goes back to what we said with tank fish. You see the personalities in a tank. Anyone who kept goldfish or animals, you see different personalities, and you see that played out in the water as well. Definitely, you see the ones that lead the pack. You see the ones that
always come in first.
Oh yeah, exactly. The ones that are in first, and those are the ones. The ones that are inquisitive.
Yeah.
It's no coincidence. The ones that I see that are inquisitive are the ones that get caught a lot.
Yeah.
So I recognise. Oh, that's that one. Oh my God, that's that one.
Yeah.
And the ones that are at the back of the pack, and I get a glimpse of them. Lo and behold, are the ones that hardly ever get caught.
Strange, isn't it? Another thing that I found, I went out snorkeling about a year ago with you, and I was snorkeling, and you're past depth height, like you're past 6 foot, something like that.
Yeah.
One thing that I can remember jumping out my bloody skin. I seen a carp for the first time come past my eye mask and my snorkel.
Yeah.
And it must have been about £15. But when you're in the water and you're that close to the carp, it looked like a whale.
It's massive.
I was like, oh! And I can remember jumping and kind of trying to get to the surface and sort of spray out my water from the snorkel. It absolutely made me jump. It was almost like Jaws coming at you.
They look huge. Everything's magnified underwater, especially when they're coming close to you. So yeah, it's
I can almost touch it with my finger on its nose. It was that close. It just come right up to me.
Yeah, I've touched a few carp underwater, and their tails have hit the camera. A couple of times when I've been filming and everything. It's it's great, mate, isn't it? It's like the closest you get to swim with dolphins or something like that. Swim with carp is special.
It's mad because on the bank they're very aware of us and our our kind of hunter-gatherer kind of approach to. They just know that you're trying to angle for them.
Yeah.
But one thing, when we were in the water with them, Mark, they, as we just mentioned, they were so relaxed, as if like there's no danger here. Don't know what you are. Who are you? What are you doing in my environment? One thing I do know is you're not going to hurt me, so I'll just come and have a swim with you.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting that they didn't come up close to us in the known swims. So when we went out in that swim, there were everyone fishes.
Yeah.
We went out and we were paddling around there. We didn't see any fish, but as soon as we went off we sort of walked down towards the sides where the fish come in and out the islands all the time.
Yeah,
we're on their patrol route, and they're there and they're accepting, aren't they? So I can't help thinking that sort of they do earmark the swims as well. They do know all about where they're expecting to see lines and people, and where they're not. And certainly where we were planting lilies and that, they never see any anglers there, do they? Not really.
No, and it's no coincidence actually that I'm actually fishing. You could say it's not a swim, is it?
It's illegal, Mike. What you're doing? Absolutely
I poked
illegal.
a rod through the rushes, which I know for a fact they're not expecting a bait to be there. So maybe that played into it. I don't know.
Yeah. Whereas where I've put a rod,
people fish there, don't they?
People fish there a lot. So that's my excuse at the moment. The moment,
I'm not too sure you've taken the cap off the hook.
Oh, I don't know what I've done, mate.
Do you know what I mean?
What I've done. It's a rod I've used. It's set up from last time, so everything should be caught fishing it last time as well.
Yeah,
so
it should be tickety-boo.
God knows, mate. God knows.
Another thing that might be worth talking about, since we're talking about being in the water, Mark, and I know it's a fascinating thing that you always talk to me about off tape, is when you're walking in the water and you're walking out and you're up to your neck and whatnot, you can see the bottom here because it's gin clear Cotswold gravel pit. And one thing that I've found fascinating, and today it just reinforces it again, because I don't spend much time in the water, not like you, but you can see a spot and it can glow, and it looks like if you were on the bank, you'd see that spot and you'd think, oh, that potentially I could drop a bait on there. If it's a patrol route, I might get a chance, and it glows.
Yeah.
One thing I found, as you go over it, it looks like gravel, but I'm finding really random that my foot would sink into it past my ankle with the silt.
Yeah.
And then other spots where you think, oh, that looks dirty, it's solid. It's like hitting a slab, and you can't tell from above, based on the colour of the spot, actually what substrate it is.
Absolutely. There's so many different variations out there, and the only true way to do it is to stick your foot on it, isn't it, and have a feel, and you'll be surprised what just slips away into almost like liquid clay.
Yeah, that's it. That's a perfect example. Liquid clay. You just go, doom.
On both the lakes here, we see quite a lot of that, and you get this like fine layer of sediment over everything, which hides stuff, and then you're walking on what you think is like a silty area, and it's like an inch underneath is quite gravelly or quite firm. It's a real eye opener, isn't it? If anyone can sort of wade along the margins in their lakes and that, just sort of putting their foot on these different areas, obviously safety obviously very important. But you can learn a hell of a lot just from looking over the side of a boat with a prodding stick and that, and it's a whole new world under there. So fascinating. I absolutely love it. Yeah, you
don't find it like that though, do you? I find your waders don't really give you a true reflection. Obviously we've been out with our bare feet.
Very true.
The clay is fascinating. It's fascinating, and the gravel's fascinating because it just isn't. It isn't what I think it is from above.
Yeah, and the clay is quite sticky, isn't it?
Yes. Very
sticky in places. Different types of clay. There's the blue clay here, which is incredibly tacky, and you can see the fish rubbing on them, trying to dislodge parasites and all sorts. It's they know that world absolutely inside out, and they know all the terrains, all the little tricks, won't they? And each one of those different substrates have pros and cons for food and for parasites and all sorts,
and
amazing.
For rig presenting, because one thing that we always imagine when we cast out is we all go through the rigmarole of thinking, okay, that's the spot, getting a drop, happy with that, and in our mind we always assume that the lake bed is flat.
Yes.
So you think, that will lay the rig out. The rig will be perfectly flat on the bottom.
Yeah.
And everything will be presenting perfectly. But there isn't a single flat spot out in that lake. It's all undulating.
Yeah.
And to the point where it looks like a desert rippled sand.
Yes.
So your rigs are never laid flat.
Absolutely.
Never.
That was one thing I did notice when I snorkeled and took the GoPros out, and I put them at base level on the bottom, and you're videoing across the bottom of the water.
Yeah.
Very rarely, if ever, do you see anything perfectly flat. There's all sorts, as you say, ridges and bumps, and even little bits of weed poking
Stones,
up. Anything. There's just ridiculous amount there, and you it just throws everything out the window where you've got in your mind's eye where you're trying to throw everything out and it's all going nice and straight on the bottom. And in some ways that has led me down the path of using sort of the helicopter style rigs, because you can just, you're moving that stop up 1 or 2 inches as a fail-safe on most areas, unless you're dropping it in and you can see it going in. It just gives you that buffer. And I find 9 times out of 10, if you can just present a bait, you found fish, if you can just present a bait to them, that's enough to get a bite, rather than trying to look at the mechanics of, yes, an inline lead would set the hook much quicker because obviously it's full impact straight away. But I don't know. I try and I sort of play the percentage game a little bit as well with that, just with what I've seen from snorkeling or going out on the water myself, and I'm sure you're the same, mate.
Oh yeah, it twists your melon a little bit, because with all the rig, I like fishing mono or stiff rig, or at best a combi rig, really, which is all my rigs have got an element of stiff in it, which is a stiff hook link. So ideally in my mind, I'm pushing that away from the lead. I'm sort of presenting fairly flat on the spot, so I'm spending a little bit of time looking for the right spot. But it's never going to be as I imagine it. It's never going to be flat, and as you say, just giving that little helicopter 2-inch movement just compensates for that undulating bottom, doesn't it? It
does, and it can help your rig from being stuck up, I suppose, out of the air a little bit. But I don't know. I'd implore anyone to sort of boat fishing sort of opens your eyes, because at least you can cast out and go and have a look, and or if you can do it in the margins, and just it just sort of throws everything out the window a little bit from everything that you're taught and everything that you see being written down and in your mind's eye. It's very rarely that straightforward, and there's so many variables, absolutely loads.
Yeah, and I think we'll probably cover rigs off in a separate episode, because that's going to be hours worth of chat. But it all boils down to, I guess, observation, and it's the more you look, the more you see, the more you kind of develop a bit of an understanding of what is going on out there. And if you can, as you say, just go and have a little look in the margins, go and paddle around up to your ankles and whatnot, and go and feel the substrate, because it's definitely not what you imagine.
No, it isn't, and that's the best way for learning, isn't it? Absolutely. Go and do it yourself.
Well, we've been waffling on, believe it or not, with that interruption for nearly 40 minutes.
Have we?
Yeah, and we've got a guest on as well, so it's probably a good time for us to catch up on our lives in the last 4 weeks. I know you can go first, because you've had an absolute monster of a month.
Yes, from the previous month, where it seemed that nothing happened for 4 weeks.
Yeah.
This month it seems to be. I can't believe it's just 4 weeks since the last one. So it's crikey. Where do I start?
What came first?
I'm trying to think what came first. I think it would have been the opener for this the lake we're sat on now. We always have a barbecue and an opening day, and the lake had been shut prior to that for 6 weeks, and in that 6 weeks I had put a hefty amount of supplementary feed in for the fish to build them back up to their pre-spawning weights for health. I think it's crucially important, and it's something I've covered in my next diary piece.
Yeah, we've recorded a chapter on that, haven't we, about what and how to sort of maybe look after a lake during post-spawning, which not enough lakes do, to be fair.
No, they don't. It's all incentivised around opening as fast as you can, and obviously people have paid their money, and we're lucky in the sense that we've got, well, I suppose it's from been from day one anyway, but we're lucky in the sense we've got the right sort of mix of anglers who are perfectly accepting of the fact that when the fish spawn they need a recovery period, and let's face it, who wants to be fishing for spawning fish that have just spawned? They're invariably down in weight, they're a bit battered, they've got scales missing, and
well, you'd be surprised, Mark. I see it all the time. I see it on social media all the time. You look at the fish and you think, as a gut feel, you can never tell, but I know full well some of the lakes that are very prolific and busy, they just, as we said last time, they just shut a swim.
Yeah,
and then you see some of the fish, and they look battered and distressed, and they're knackered. They just, and as anglers, to be fair, I don't know if you can call yourself an angler if you're going to fish for spawning fish, but that's just my own personal view.
No, I think you're right. I just don't agree with it at all. And those lakes that open and encourage it, don't they? But I'm a member of lakes where the fish are spawned, it's shut for a week and a half, and there'll be like a forum or a Facebook page or something. Your anglers demanding that the lake be opened. It's been 2 weeks, it needs to be opened, and it's like, my Christ, where is that coming from? That's coming from a selfish greed or whatever. Or I'm just mate, just shut the week for 6 weeks as a minimum.
Bonkers, isn't it? It's bonkers. And I think if you don't educate people, and not enough lakes follow that best practice, then new anglers know no different, and that's the thing with it.
Yeah.
They just assume that it's okay.
Yeah.
And you know, for all intents and purposes, you know, I was a big supporter of the closed season. Everything needs a break to a degree. I mean, the closed season was a long time, of course, and at times the thing that the closed season didn't ever accommodate was if they spawned after the closed season.
Yeah, it was always too early, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was always too early.
Always
So
way too early.
for me, the closed season should be around, you know, I don't know, start of June.
Yeah,
For maybe a month or so.
Yeah.
Everything needs a break.
Yeah, it does. The banks, the fishery, everything is a time to reset. It's nature, isn't it? And just fishing for those fish during that time, it's just exhausting, isn't it, for them? And it's just never. Let's face it, these fish are hounded all their lives, aren't they? And crikey, they welcome a 5 week, 4 week, 6 week break.
They're not hounded by you today.
No, exactly. Yeah, they're pretty safe at the moment. I'm going to have to get in on your spot, mate. I reckon you've been sneaking some bait down there.
I reckon in a minute when we have a break, you should move that rod for sure. So, sorry, you were saying about what you've been up to, the barbecue, the opening night.
Yeah, so the barbecue. So, you know, it's a great opportunity to get all the members together and have a relaxing time like we do. So, fantastic to have a barbecue, and you know, people can choose to put bait in over that 6 week period, which all helps the fish. You know, so it's a win-win. And we had the opening night, and great event. It was brilliant. We had loads of lovely food. Weather was lovely. The sun was out, and we had a few fish caught as well. So that was a weekend that was fully enjoyed. All the family came down as well. So absolutely lovely. We've been quite lucky on the opening days that we've always had nice weather, haven't we? We've never had
not taking fishing too seriously, which that also seems sometimes a little bit lost in some of the angling today, isn't it? It's always faster, bigger.
Yeah.
Like, you know, everything is geared around better, faster, bigger, now, here. I don't know, sometimes it's very blessed that a group of anglers that fish this lake, you know, we just take our foot off the gas a little bit and enjoy each other's company, but most importantly, just have a good time.
Yeah.
And like, if a fish comes along, it's a bonus. You know, luckily the... Oh, you right?
That was a beep.
You've got a take, I think.
You reckon?
Yeah. I think I just heard a beep again.
Right, let me just quickly make a dash.
Oh, it's not far. It's like a couple of meters down there. No. I think he's been done. I think you've been done. You've been done?
I don't know, mate. That was one beat, that was.
You've been done. You've been done. You ain't got the undulating liner Ronnie pop-up on, have you?
No, that's it. That's my mistake. Oh, damn it. No.
Oh, dear.
Oh, well.
So we're talking about, just everyone just enjoys it, doesn't it? It's fun. It's a fun time.
Yeah, it's quality, mate. It was really good. I really look forward to that event, and long may it continue. So that was the weekend and taken care of, and then after that I was I can't remember last time where I left it, but I've been after this particular male fish. Seems like forever, and I've really been concentrating on it for the last 3 seasons. Sort of just doing little spells of time at certain times of the year. I've been very fortunate to catch a few of the stock in the lake, and they're just beautiful, as you know, Mike. They're beautiful fish, really old, and particularly this one fish is well over 40 years old. Don't know the exact age.
I reckon you're being conservative. I reckon it might be 50.
I would not be at all surprised.
I reckon it's up there. It's around 50ish, I reckon.
We've got sort of photos back into the 80s, and it was a big fish back then, wasn't it?
It was a 30 pounder in the 80s, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was 86. It was 30 something pounds. So
do the maths on that, really.
Try, yeah. It's an absolutely prehistoric fish, and I've had the pleasure of photographing it for lots of friends over the years, and it was a fish I lost in my first 20 minutes of joining the lake about 10 years ago. I was gutted at the time, but in a bizarre way, it's nice that the story unfolded the way it did. So I photographed this fish for a number, including yourself, Mike, for a number of people, and it's just such an old dinosaur of a fish, and it hasn't got that long left. Let's face it. So over the last 3 years, I've been sort of earmarking specific times of the year where I really go at it for a 2 or 3 week period, down there all the time, putting a bit of bait in here and there, and during that period I've been very lucky. I've caught most of the other fish out of the lake, and they're old and they're just as worthy as the big one in there as well. So it's been absolutely lovely. I've really enjoyed my time there, and I've managed to catch, I think from the last podcast, I managed to catch one or two more.
Yeah, you did. Yep.
And I was thinking, that fish can't be far away. It can't be far away. And then with the opening weekend, I think the fish spawned as well, like 2 or 3 weeks ago. And although that big male doesn't spawn, the old fish sort of lose the
reproductive kind of drive, does it?
Exactly. I've seen it on when they get that old. They just don't. The females stop producing ovulation, a bit like women do as well. When they get to the menopause. And I noticed like split dorsal. And, oh, that's another beat. Go on. And I notice this particular fish doesn't really get involved with what I've seen over the last 3 years. It's in the area, but it doesn't get full on involved with the females, like the younger females.
It avoids it, doesn't it? It's actually a bit of a loner, I think, Mark, isn't it?
Yeah. So that happened, and I thought, well, let's give it. So we gave it
about a month, wasn't it?
I can't remember now. It was a few weeks anyway, and then we had the opening, and we had obviously things happen, and I was like, well, I've got to get back over and fish for it at some point, because time ticks on, and I knew there were some other anglers who were going to start their campaigns, if you like, and they're good anglers. They're going to catch a few. The chances are it'll probably get caught. So it was it was a really random day. I had and I can thank one of my suppliers for this at Baitworks, because I had done all the jobs for Friday. I'd got all the bait finished, and I was waiting on some soya flour, of all things. I was waiting for some soya flour, and it never turned up Friday. So I was like, oh God, I need it to do what I need to do to formulate one of the base mixes. So when it got to Monday, and I rang the supplier, and they said, sorry Mark, we can't get it to you till Wednesday now. I'm like, oh, you're joking. So luckily I'd done enough in stockpile, so we had enough base mixes to see us through, so it wasn't a problem. But I had 2 days spare, and I was like, do you know what? I don't know what to do with myself now. So I've sort of come down the lakes, and I thought I'll do some bits and pieces in terms of planting reeds and all sorts like that. And I was on the way down, and I thought, do you know what? I'm going to just pop in the lake and just have a walk round. So I haven't been round there for a few weeks now, and I'm going to have a look and see if I can find this fish. So that's what I did. I drove down there, didn't have the dog with me, thank God.
On a whim.
It was just, I just going to walk round and see if I can ignite the passion. Look, not that I needed igniting it, but just something to go on.
Well, you do. I do in this heat.
Yeah, in this heat you do. Yeah. So I've gone down to the lake, and I've walked round. The wind's belting into one of the corners, and there was some fish there, but not the big one. And I'm thinking, I wonder, is it gone back up to that same snag tree I saw it this time last year? So I've walked all the way at the top end on the back of the wind.
Yeah.
Didn't see any fish up there at all, and so I got into this snag tree, and I'm there looking for about 5 minutes. And this one small fish comes through, and it's a young fish, about sort of, I don't know, 5 or 6 years old, probably like 14 or 15 pound. And there was another fish in the weed behind it, and I could see this fish sort of mouthing at the weed, but it was masked by all of the weed. So I don't know what fish that is. And I've made a movement on the tree trunk to sort of try and get a better look, and I've clumsily, my foot sort of slipped a little bit, and it's caused a vibration. So that fish in the weed then has basically done a circle, gone through like a hole. I could see there's one clear area where I could see everything, and it's basically come through this hole, and it's that one. And I'm like, there it is, the big one. Oh, and it's done a circuit out round the tree and come back into the same bit of weed. And I'm thinking, there you are. I was thinking, right. And by this time it was late in the afternoon, and I'm thinking, I've got to just fish for this fish.
Yeah.
So I was like, do I put some bait? I'd usually put some bait in and try and prep the area and do that, but I thought, I've just got to go and fish for this. And I was tempted to go back that night, but from previous years I knew that this area was a day area, and that fish would be out of there by 9 o'clock. And if it was going to come back in, it'd probably be back in about 10 in the morning. And that's how that's the area of the lake it likes for that time of day.
It's a sunny spot. You can imagine it being an old fish. You can imagine it just waddling up to recharge its sort of old bones, and just also it's an area that, as you know, Mark, it kind of it's almost like a loner spot, isn't it? It
is, and interestingly, it's a new spot as well. So the tree only got felled about 3 years ago, and ever since day one it has felled. The fish have been using it a lot of the fish, but in particular that one.
Yeah,
it was a favourite area of it. So I thought, there's no point putting bait in. I might as well come here in the morning, get the rods in, on a day session and just put the rods in, fish some bait, and just fish for it, because there's only 2 fish in the area at the moment, and if that stays the same, I've got a very good chance if I get a bite. So that's what I've done. Literally, didn't get up extra early. Literally had my rods sort of sorted for just a day session. Couple of rods, got a few handfuls of boilies.
Yeah.
Got up there, flipped the rods out, and just sat back and then sort of proceeded to get eaten by mosquitoes, which is absolutely ravenous on that bank. And literally got to about 9-10 o'clock, looked in the snag, nothing there, and I'm thinking, oh geez, is it going to come back? Then all of a sudden the sun sort of come out, the wind has sort of started to push into us, and the wind had changed, and I saw a few fish sort of pop to the surface, and this one fish from the left just made a beeline into where I was fishing, back out the water, and I'm thinking, that's a good fish, and all of a sudden it's come into the area, and I'm thinking, that's disappeared. It's disappeared like 5 yards, 10 yards from the spot, and I'm thinking that's sunk down, definitely sunk down. And I'm thinking, wow, that's something's going to happen here. And I'm getting a couple of lifts, a couple of bleeps. I've walked down the bank and I'm looking in the gin clear water at this spot, which is only, I don't know, 15 yards out, 20 yards out, and I can just make out a tench or something, a shape, and maybe a carp down there. And I'm thinking, this has got to happen. And over the next 20 minutes I had another couple of lifts, a couple of bleeps, and I'm sort of paranoid now, thinking, have I got a good lie? Have I, the rod's gone down, has it gone out, looped over a bit of weed? You think all these things go through your head. And I thought, no, I'm just gonna sit on my hands, make yourself a cup of tea, just relax, make yourself a cup of tea. So rarely on a day session I had a cup of tea there.
You've never got a cup of tea, Kit.
I know, but do you know what? For this session, because I had minimal stuff. Literally no bed chair, just a chair. There was room on my barrow, and I thought, do you know what? I could put my tea bag there, and it wouldn't take up any room and not be that heavy. So for that reason, I thought, right, I put it on there, and I thought, right, I'm gonna have an Earl Grey. By the time I finish that Earl Grey, if I hadn't had a take, I'm gonna reposition the rod, even if I think there's fish in the area, because I'd rather do that than fish the whole day, wind it in at 4 o'clock, and find that the bait's span round and the hair has gone through the hook point or something random, which can happen. So anyway, I've made a cup of tea, I just had my second sip, and literally, and I'm fishing braid as well, and I had one beep, and I've looked down and the rod's then gone, wah! And it's absolutely taken off, and my tea has literally gone everywhere, scrambled down to the rod, and the fish, our fish, is just flat rodded me for like 25-30 yards, and I'm thinking, and at the time I'm thinking, oh, this is a good fish, but I don't know which one it is. There's quite a few fish in there that can do that to you. So this fish is like stripping line, and I've managed to pump it back, which is a very weird experience on braid, as you know, Mike. It's very, very hot in your mouth. You can feel every head knock, and because you can feel the jerky notion of the head moving, it can sometimes fool you into thinking it's a small fish because it's very jerky.
Yes, yeah.
And it's flicking off the fins and all that, and I'm thinking, oh god, this is heart in the mouth stuff. So I've got it back within probably about 20 yards, and then suddenly this fish has just literally nosedived towards me into a weed bed, and I'm thinking, hello, this is now sounding a bit all too familiar, and anyone who knows this fish will know that that's exactly what it does. When I lost it nosedived 10 yards from me sort of bringing it over the net into a weed bed, and literally
it knows all the old tricks.
It knows it, mate, and that is a telltale sign for that fish. It just does. That's what it does. I know plenty of people who have lost it over the years because of that on floater gear and on all sorts, and it was lost the last year. Exactly the same thing happened. So I'm thinking, oh, this could be him. So luckily for me, steady pressure, it started to give. Otherwise, it'd be going around at the troops to get a boat, and so it started to come towards me. And luckily for me, it hit the surface, and a bit of weed had flopped over its head and nose and eyes. So it literally then just come in a bit like a dog on the lead. And as it's coming towards me, I can see the dorsal suddenly just flickered, and the dorsal is quite unique on this fish, as anyone would know. And as it flicked, it can only be one fish, and I'm like, oh my god, it's that one, it's that fish. And as it's coming towards me, I can see the length of it then, and the tail at the back, and it's got quite a distinct tail because it's an old fish. It's a real gnarly old fish. And as it's gone in the net, I'm like, wow, that's got to be him. And I can see that the tail's literally folded up out of the weed, and I can see the tail, and I've studied that tail so many times. There's so many little creases and folds in it, and it can only be one fish. But for absolute certainty, the net goes down. I've literally peeled away the weed, felt down by its head, and then felt the dorsal for absolute clarity, and I'm like, it's him. And I thought I was going to let out a massive roar over the water park, but do you know what? I didn't. It was just a lovely moment. It was so peaceful.
You were the only one on the lake, weren't you?
I was the only one on the complex, only one there, and I just looked to the sky and just started smiling. It was just lovely, and that was it, mate. And that was the fish. And I was so grateful to have a couple of friends, including yourself, to come up at a whim's notice to photograph and share the moment, and to help, because it's an old fish. You're conscious of time and you want to get it back. And it was just a lovely day, and quite surreal really, because that pretty much ended my time there on that particular lake. So
which is never a nice feeling, is it?
No, it's not actually. You sort of close. There is one other fish I haven't caught there, but to try and go back and target that one fish is difficult. It's difficult enough targeting this one. So who knows, mate? But it was lovely to see it, and it's just such an old. It's everything you want it to be. Such a massive head. The head's bigger than mine, I think. It's just
I'll tell you what always shocked me with that fish, and again, it just blew my mind when I come to take some pictures for you, is the size of that fish's mouth is almost, the only way I can describe it, if you imagine a coffee cup, and you look at a coffee cup face on, even that isn't big enough.
Yeah, you get like a saxuma in there.
It's a huge mouth, and it's just unblemished. For its age, it looks, it's clearly old fish, but it's had such a great life, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has, mate.
It's had such a great life, just being almost forgotten about and just left to do its thing and grow old gracefully. And to be honest, we've spoken about it many times before. It's in Otter Central.
Yeah,
like how he has survived, but because it's a male, we've spoken about it in the past. Whether they've got a stronger sort of first initial power blast when they're escaping any predatory kind of risk. Maybe that's done in pride. I don't know, but it's old and he's survived, and for all the reasons that you've just described, I would probably say he's up there. I don't think this is biased at all. He's up there with one of the most unique carp in the country in terms of its looks.
Absolutely, mate. It is. You're right, and the weight does become irrelevant. It's a big fish. It is a big fish. We all know that, and it's been up over 40 pounds on a couple of occasions. But it's just what a fish, mate, and what a fish to have just in your album. It's one of them. You just love to have met it, and I've lucky enough to have photographed it a few times, so I have met it, but to have it in your own net, I didn't think it was going to happen.
Well, you didn't, but ironic, I'm just looking at my phone now, I'm looking at a message from you which is 8:16 in the morning. It's a picture and it says waiting for the one and you've got a picture of your rods, and I've gone back and said one more bite and he's yours. And then the next
I forgot about this.
And then the next message I get from you is where is it? Hang on, bear with me. He's mine.
What time was that?
About 11 o'clock.
Was it about 11? Okay, so that was.
He's mine, and that was that. And it was almost like, I don't know, maybe it was written in the script, mate. It's sometimes it happens, doesn't it? And if you wouldn't have, as you said, if that supplier wouldn't have cancelled on you, and you wouldn't have bust your gut to go and have a look, just one look, random look, and there was no pre-baiting really involved, and for a change you just fished with your eyes. It
was a lovely way to catch it, because sometimes you can try and orchestrate a bite, and that does work, and that's hugely effective on the water park lakes here, where you continuously put a little bit of bait into an area and you go and fish it, but it can be quite sterile as well, because you're tied to the area. It ties you to an area, and there's nothing like just going on instinct and just floating about, just literally walking around, seeing a fish and fishing on instinct, because that is the pure nature of fishing, isn't it, at the end of the day. So to have it unfold and happen like that was very, very special, and I wouldn't have wanted it any other way, really. I don't think, if you look back and could write it. So I have missed out a chunk actually in between that, because I was trying to think that timeline was a bit happened a bit quick, but between that I had actually gone up to Norton Disney as well.
Yes.
Sorry,
mate,
there's a lot gone on. So Norton Disney is the new lakes that embryo was just purchased up in Lincoln, or just this side of Lincoln. and I think there's 6 or 7 lakes, and they're hopefully going to purchase another 1 or 2, and their aim is to make it like linear fisheries of the north.
Yeah.
And what a complex it is, and it's all bare. It's all like the lakes are just literally been dug probably only 4 or 5 years ago, if that. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of work that's going on up there, and it's no different to what the lake is here and how that was developed. We developed this lake, so it was amazing to see ground zero, and all the fish that have gone in, and we caught quite a few, and had a barbecue and a big social event as well. So that was that was absolutely lovely to go out there and do some fishing and catch a few as well,
No, I know it was lovely, and I know it's a lovely complex, and it's destined for amazing things, but you're missing out something you did to, you could say, one of your friends that that really relayed to me, which would make a funny story, really, mate. I can't let you go without giving us a bit of an insight into the old Mark Bryant, the prankster.
Well, yeah, I'm known to do a few pranks and that, and sometimes I can't resist, especially after maybe a cheeky beer or 2 or wine or 2. So this thing was to get this Norton Disney. It was basically to bring all the, I don't know what you want to call them. I don't want to call them consultants, and I don't want to call them sponsored anglers, but it's basically the guys associated in with Corda. There's all sorts of connotations when you bring up those words of what that actually is. But anyway, it was
guys that help promote Corda.
There you go. Yeah, there you go. In the nicest possible way.
Yeah.
So there was about sort of 15, 20 of us that came together, all met at Norton Disney, and Danny puts on like a DJ and food and some beer. And also you can fish as well. So as you can imagine, it's a lovely event.
It's a good relationship building event.
Yeah.
It's quite good, isn't it? That thing goes a long way with the people that are associated with a company.
Absolutely, but invariably, as you know, Mike, there's a few beers, a bit of alcohol, sun was out, food. You get a bit worse for wear, don't you?
You didn't actually fish, did you?
I didn't fish, mate, for the first. I was there for 2 nights, and I didn't fish until the last morning,
which was like 3 or 4 hours.
For 3 or 4 hours, and managed to catch a few. But anyway, but yeah, because I don't, if I get a bit intoxicated, I don't like fishing for fish when I'm like that anyway, so I wouldn't do it. But in the day, and that obviously is a bit more fair game. But so anyway, we're enjoying the social activities, shall we say? And by the time you get to about 11, 12 o'clock at night, I'm ready for bed, and I've had a few, and
You're such a lightweight. You are such a lightweight. Like Giles usually gets it in the neck, but when you over the years, you've really gone off alcohol, haven't you?
I have, definitely.
I'm glad you admitted that.
No, I have, mate. I have. I don't like the taste. Really don't like the taste. I can just about manage a rosé spritzer. Or something like, or a pint of Guinness.
Rosé spritzer. What? And that's 3/4 lemonade.
Yeah, I just don't like the taste. And do you know what? I've got to the age now, of the ripe old age of 43. I couldn't care less what people think.
I know, we give you so much shit for it. Excuse my language when we go out on that. You do not care, do you? And
I don't care.
just to cement this, you even finished the night off with an espresso martini at best.
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely.
What?
Have a coffee, mate. It's just I got to be true to myself. And I'm not trying to be anything else, so that's what I like. And
all right.
I like my rosé and a bit of lemonade. I love that, and I like a bit of martini and Coke as well.
Pathetic.
Martini Rosso and Coke.
Pathetic.
So yeah,
sounds like an extra for James Bond. Shaken, not stirred.
So be warned, if anyone wants a pint with myself, it probably won't be a pint. It'd be a Guinness at best, but it'd probably be all the others that we mentioned. So so yeah, I've had a few by this time, and the party's still going on, and I'm like, if I have any more, I know that the next morning I'll be so dehydrated and hungover that it'll be a write-off, and I won't be able to do anything. So I thought, I've got to take myself off to bed. So
that's 2 pints then.
I'm okay, mate. I can have a few. I'm going to have a few units, but I'm sort of starting to walk back, and I'm walking back where I'm fishing, where I'm sleeping, I should say, is right round the other side of the lake. So I've got to go past loads of bivvies. Yeah, and they're all empty, obviously. And as I'm going back past these bivvies, I go past the first 3 or 4, and I'm thinking, I've got to stitch these up somehow. I've got to do something. I can't just walk past these bivvies. So I've gone down the first few bivvies, and I'm getting like there was Dave Finn. Who else was there?
I suppose you don't know all of them.
I don't know all. I only just met them. Some I only just met. So I'm putting like thistles and stinging nettles in sleeping bags, like right at the bottom, right at the bottom.
The old Mark Bryant. Yeah. That's the old Mark Bryant at the back.
And I'm giggling to myself, like, and I'm really giggling to myself, doing it, like, loads of foreigns, all sorts. Anyway, and I've got to halfway down the bank. I've come to this bivvy, right? I don't know whose it is, and it is absolutely pristine, and it's all. the guys put all the pegs in every single hole. You know, I use 3 pegs like you, Mike, as well.
Yeah.
I've
got a bag of 4 pegs, and that's my whole bivvy.
Well, this guy's put a peg in every single eyelet all the way round. There's like a little table in there. There's a pair of little like moccasin shoes.
No.
I'm thinking, who the hell's right? They're having it. This person is having it. So I've literally pulled all the pegs out of the bivvy, span the bivvy round so it's facing the opposite way. I've then got the sleeping bag, pulled that inside out. I've got the bed chair, pulled the bed chair outside, put it upside down, literally emptied out all these bags, which are all like put in perfect. Everything put in perfect. Emptied all the bags out inside the bivvy, like, you know.
No.
Yeah. And I've like come away from there laughing my head off, like, you know, and I'm so far away from where the barbecue area is, no one can hear me. I'm just laughing all the way back. Gone back to the bivvy, got my head down, thought nothing of it really. Got up in the morning, and then of course back at the barbecue area they do breakfasts. So I've got up and I thought, I'm absolutely dying for something to drink. I need to go over. So I've gone over, got something to drink there. A few guys have put their rods out. I haven't even put my rods out. I just thought, I'm just hanging. I need to go and get something to drink. So I've gone over there. I'm sat down. There's all the guys starting to eat their bacon rolls and that. And anyway, I've not said anything. And a couple of guys going, God, who was that who done that to our bivvy last night? And he put thistles and everything. And everyone was roaring laughter, like, you know, and like Dave Finn had got like stinging nettle things up on his feet or whatever.
I suppose if you had a pint or two, you just probably jump in your bag, just go to sleep.
You don't notice till you just get in there. You know, at Chirampoor, I remember historically, we put crayfish in people's sleeping bags.
I hate them. That's a nightmare.
They're evil.
It's almost as bad as that slug in my mouth, which ironically quite a few people messaged me about.
So I'm laughing, and I'm like, a few people have started to suss it may have been me and that, and I'm saying,
well, the early lever. It's got to be somebody left early.
Yeah, it was the early lever. So anyway, I'm saying about the story, and I'm like, I couldn't resist it or whatever, and I'm telling the story about this bivvy that I've done, and with that, Danny Fairbrass has walked straight behind me, and he's gone, was that you who done that last night? And I was like, done what? He said, done all the bivvies. And I said, oh well, I've done a few, like, he said, that was mine. And he was absolutely, well, he wasn't very happy, I must admit.
I can imagine Dan is quite pedantic and clean and OCD.
Mate, yeah, he is, mate, very, very. So turning his bivvy round, he said, I was so furious last night, I was going to go back to the barbecue and bollock whoever it was. But I was that tired, and obviously had a couple of beers and that. I literally just had to flip the bed chair and go make best of the sleep. And luckily it was quite hot last night. But yeah, he was absolutely fuming.
Brilliant. So you didn't notice Danny's spot?
Didn't have a clue. Did not have a clue.
Brilliant.
I thought he was sleeping in his van.
And you didn't care?
And to be honest with you, I didn't care.
Yeah,
no, I couldn't give a toss.
Yeah. That's your consultancy gone?
Yeah, it could be, mate. Could be. I'm a free agent now. So
Fox, they're better you better.
But yeah, mate, I can't resist little things like that, and if most people take it in the right sort of manner, and I'm sure I'll get my comeuppance at some point.
You've done it to me.
I've done it to loads
like
of
the
people.
old Mark Bryan has been renowned. So we were having there's a horsefly there. We were having don't for 1 minute think this is our normal thing. Like, we were having a friendly fishing match for the afternoon to see who bought the pint down the pub, and it was literally, we had one or 2 hours. It was a lake close to here.
Oh, a little commercial venue that.
Yeah,
wasn't
there's
it?
four of us in a row. We were going for a pub lunch. We had a rod each, and we were like, right, who catches the most wins, and then obviously they don't have to buy the pint. And it was down to me and you. Last 10 minutes, the fish are going crazy on the top. I've hooked one, landed one, puts me in the lead. So I'm trying to now think, Christ, I just need to sort me at the same time, you've landed one too. Actually, a bigger one. So we're having our picture taken, because it was a bit of a dual effort, which was quite nice to take a picture. I've gone, literally, the time's ticking on. There's no time left on the clock. I've got the fish going bonkers in front of me, and so have you.
I remember.
And I'm just thinking, right, I'm shaking. I've got to get a mixer or floating bait on, because I'm literally just lowering it on its nose. I'm going to catch one. Shake. You've hooked into another one, and I got like 60 seconds left. I could do this. And I looked at my hook, and my hook was snapped on the point. And all I could hear you was doing exactly that. Going, you bent my hook over with a stone.
I unhooked the fish for you in the net, I think, and then at the same time I grabbed a pebble and just roughed it on the point and snapped the point off.
I didn't have any time to redo the point or to redo the hook or anything. All I can hear is you laughing, pulling the last fish over the net cord.
It's fair game, mate.
And winning the match. You git.
Oh, that's a competitive edge in me, mate. Unfortunately, I am a bit competitive when it comes to all stuff like that. So
yeah. Oh well, never mind. That all sticks in my memory as the prankster that is Mark Bryan.
I do, mate. It does come out once in a while.
Yeah.
Usually after a couple of rosés.
Oh,
that was another beep.
that's a beep.
I'll have to go and check that.
You better go and check it.
At some point, I will.
Well, do you know what? In terms of what I've been up to for the last month, I probably won't cover much off apart from I was at the same barbecue as you. I had the joy of coming to photograph your ultimate prize, which was a real moment that stuck in my mind. I bought you a little bottle of fizz.
You did? Oh yeah, sorry, mate. I didn't mention
Giles
that.
was already there,
Yes,
and he bought you a cold Corona, hadn't he?
That's it, mate. Yeah.
So
yeah.
you were sat with a little bottle of fizz and a cold Corona at sort of lunchtime on a nice sort of muggy afternoon. And it was a beautiful. I only had an hour or so, but for that hour, I got stung about 26. I counted them the other day, about 26 times by mosquitoes. 1 hour.
Ridiculous.
On that dirty, ditchy bank, and it was like, what the. And I've got scars to prove it. And, oh, that's another beep. Yeah, you might want to have a look at that. But yeah, so I was there too, and that was absolutely joyful. And the opening night here at your lake market was, I managed a couple of lovely fish, a lovely sort of priory leany, real nice overslung mouth, long fish, mid-20, destined for good things. But the best of times was had by everyone at the barbecue, and all my friends and yourself, Mark. We had a great time, and and it sort of took us up to more or less where we are today. I mean, I've been busy with Baitworks. I've been doing some underwater filming with the carp on here actually while it was closed, and that's been fascinating.
And exciting, that, hasn't it? I mean,
really fascinating. I mean, it's like filming wildlife. There's no script. You can't predict what's going to happen. But after a while, we've managed to train them, haven't we, to a degree, and kind of got them used to various cameras in the water.
Yep.
And
association. Yeah.
Association with their surroundings, and they definitely didn't like it to start with, even despite their desire to sort of fill their stomachs with food. And obviously, you could tell they were desperate to eat it, but they were a bit cautious with the camera. But so over time, we've got a bit of footage, which is great. And do you know what's been fascinating with that is that I've almost done some sort of little experiments as well. Well, now that I've got them sort of trained and used to the camera, I've been feeding them different size baits.
Okay.
I've been getting your offcuts from the factory, a bit of waste that we were chucking in here at the time to feed the fish up when they were closed sort of post spawning. And when you get them trained to come up to the camera, I've been feeding them up to, which is amazing, really. Like some of the offcuts of the sausages that you obviously class as waste, and they end up being sold as kind of offcuts in the end when you've got enough of them in the freezer. But some of them are like 2.5-3 inches long.
So
they're big, long sausages.
Yeah.
And I've had to snap them off, and I've been throwing them, and I've been watching them feed, and they no hesitation on picking a 3-inch sausage up straight in. And I know you wrote an article about this a while back about avoiding bream when you were fishing Coat in Swindon, and some of those baits were, what were they, Mark, in terms of you were fishing a bait like 3 inches long, but it was a barrel which was about 35 mil?
35 mil I'd say was a bit of an average in terms of diameter, and then the sausage length were varying. But they were just so selective. The bream didn't get a look in, and you just went from catching like 10 bream a night to none, and if it went off, it was a carp.
Mate, it's been fascinating watching them feeding the sausages, because I've been feeding them 3-inch long sausages, and they can only go in one way. So you think of that for the rig mechanics alone. They can't go in sideways. So with a boilie, it can go in left, right,
and spin.
It can spin in and out, but the sausage goes in one way, and they never spit it out. It's almost like it goes in and they chew it like, I don't know, it's like and then it's gone. But one thing I do notice with it is that because it's such a big bait, every sausage that they eat, they go off and do a lap and chew it and then come back to the spot. Whereas when they're feeding on the round baits, they'll hoover 10, 20, 30 of those baits up before they go and chew. Really interesting. Really interesting. It's almost like the round boilers almost don't need the pharyngeal teeth to crush them. They're just gone, straight down the gullet.
One crush and gone almost. But
the big sausage is you can see them chewing it and off they go.
Well, I noticed on the sausages, when I used to fish at Coat, that was the predominant place where I used it a lot, or one of the first times that I used it. I've used it on other lakes since, but you could then get away with baiting up with less, because you don't need to put 5k of 18 mil round boilies on a spot. You could literally put in a kilo or two, or kilo of those selected size ones. And it's easier on the pocket in terms of cost and everything. So there's a lot of bonuses for them. Massive.
First person I seen do it and spoke about it and was really fascinated by it was a friend of ours, Dave Bendel.
Oh yeah, yeah.
He fished it when on Wick, when he was trying to catch the which was at the time one of the queen fish of the water park, the big linear.
Big Lynn, yeah.
Yeah, and he would buy his bait in sausage form and cut it into like 4 or 5. I can't remember the biggest sausage that he's seen the fish take, but it was stupid. It was something like 5 or 6 inches.
Yeah, Scott. I remember talking to Scotty about it, and he said the biggest fish he's seen take was something like 12. Sorry, the biggest length.
Yeah.
On a sausage was like 12 centimetres in length. And that's like that.
Wow.
12 centimetres. He said it's a big fish, sucked it back and probably done exactly what you thought. It goes back to the pharyngeal teeth and then starts gunk, but still keeps it in the oral cavity, like, you know.
Well, Scotty talks
Massive.
about on one of the podcasts that I recorded with him recently. I missed that out actually. I've recorded a couple of podcasts with Scotty in the last month, but he talks about fish eating swan mussels.
Okay.
So if you think of a boilie sausage, which is 4 or 5 inches long, a swan mussel is the size of your hand.
Massive.
And he says, those fish eat those and crush the shells up and pass them back out in the vent.
Yeah, I've seen a few fish vent out swan mussels, and it's quite a sight.
It looks cool.
It's quite a sight, mate. Yeah.
But so it's fascinating. It's been really fascinating in terms of what you can get away with the size of the bait. And some of these fish are small. Some of these fish are like £15 that I've been watching. Some of them are big, of course. They're like nearly £40. But they know what's food, mate. And at the end of the day, that's a big return for a small amount of work eating something so big.
Definitely.
But there seems to be always a trend, isn't there? And again, it's down to media, and it's down to publicity, and it's down to what people get convinced they need to do to catch a carp. And there's been a trend like tiny little baits. Let's get on the 10 mils. The 10 mils are the ones, get the 10. What?
Everything eats them, don't they?
Yeah,
ropes,
everything eats them.
Birds, tench, bream, everything swimming. And even if you think about the natural food, the caddis flies, all sorts.
They'll devour them.
Absolutely devour them. Yeah.
But if you believe the hype, it's all about the small baits. And don't get it wrong, there's a time and a place for them. Of course there are.
Yeah.
But and just breaking the mould. How many people do you know that fish? But ironically, in Europe, they all fish 35 mil baits, 30 mil baits. But in the UK, like nobody fishes them, do they?
Standard in Europe is like starts at 20. No, starts at 22, 24 would be the smallest, and then goes up. A 24 and a 28 mil would be pretty standard over in Europe.
Yeah.
And when you actually look at them in your hand, they're not that big. Not really.
No.
Not really at all. But
the one I've just described, the fish of £15 taking a 6-inch sausage, 4 or 5 inch 6-inch sausage is. I don't know. We carp anglers are quite clonable, aren't they?
Absolutely.
They follow each other and do the same thing as the person that had a result before, and actually there's something to be said for just breaking out and doing something the complete opposite.
Definitely, and if your bait manufacturer will help you with that, and let's face it, a lot of the companies are geared towards 15 and 18 as the standard sizes because that's what everyone wants.
Yeah, including Baitworks, really, isn't it? At the moment.
Well, yeah, including us. If people wanted alternative sizes, it's difficult for us to supply that, but these old sausages and all that are always something I keep in my back pocket, and when the time's right, or when the opportunity presents itself on lakes, it can be devastating,
Yeah, very selective, as you say, very selective, especially with the tench and whatnot.
Yeah.
Worth having as a little edge to keep at your sleeve. Well, not an edge now, because we just spoke about it on the
it's out there.
It's out there. Well, do you know what? Let's have a look. We've been waffling on an hour and 15 minutes.
Well, just before I go, I mentioned that just before we go into the interview with Scotty, isn't it?
Yeah, Simon Scott.
My voice obviously is quite deep at the moment. I've just got back from Ibiza, so apologies if I do sound very different. I can assure you it is myself, Mark, but getting back from that place, and that sort of rips your cord, doesn't it, and all that.
Oh, you must say though, just to add to that, is that you went away with some friends and not just a weekend with some old lad friends and not the family.
Not the family, yep. So I was let loose in Ibiza, and that turns into out all night with your mates in it till like 6-7 in the morning, and then rinse and repeat the next day. And after 3 or 4 days of that, you're ready to come home for a start. So it's a bit of a shock coming home to this weather. But it was good. It was good fun. Good fun.
Oh, good, mate. Good. And I can see that you're still recovering. So
I am, mate.
I've done well to get you out today, which is and you're on the water, which is good. We're rehydrating you, and another couple of extra sleeps, mate, and you'll be back in the game.
One thing, very quickly. This annoyed me on the way home. I don't know how you feel about this. So I'm travelling on my own, so I'm sat obviously in the there's 3 seats, and there's 2 random strangers next to me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Both of them are men, right?
Yeah.
What's your feeling on you know when you're fighting for that bit of space, aren't you?
Yeah.
You know, you got that sort of little rest that comes down. I'm there, and I'm it's a 2.5 hour flight to Ibiza. What's your feeling about men when their elbow is not touching your elbow, but their hairs are touching your hairs, and it's really, I can really feel it. It's a really horrible sensation.
Well, let's put it out there. It's not just men; it's strangers.
Well, strangers. If it's a women don't just have lots of hair, do they, on their elbows?
What, so you don't like hair touching hair?
So he was very conscious of. He was putting his arm down by the side,
his space.
guarding his space, like you do. You put your arms down to guard you. This is where I'm sitting, and they don't come over and encroach that little rest that comes in the middle of you, doesn't it?
Well, which one? I don't know whose rest is whom. So if you're closest to the window,
so you've got
do
the
you
right hand
own
rest.
the left rest?
I don't know. You own the right rest, obviously, and you've got the window, but the left, the rest in between you and the guy on your left, that's open ground, isn't it? That's whoever gets it first.
Is it?
Whoever commits and puts their elbow down. So, but what happened was, I put my elbow down by my side, and he put his elbow on the rest, but on his side. But where it's quite tight on there, the hair follicles were touching my hair follicles.
What are you on about?
And it's a weird sensation.
What are you on about?
It's just it's if you touch skin on skin, you know it's skin on skin.
Yeah,
And that's it.
Let me have a go with yours. What, like that?
Like that? Yeah.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Lighter than that. Lighter than that.
It's just like a little couple of ants crawling over your arm.
Yeah, it's weird.
So was he doing it on purpose, you think?
I don't know, but he wasn't bothered by it. But I was, and I kept moving my arm away. And then you'd relax back, and I just didn't know if anyone else was.
Did it get to the point where you kept moving your arm away, and before you knew it, he put an arm over your shoulder?
He did, mate. He was nodding off to sleep, which made it worse because as he's relaxing, his arms like sort of just lazily
flopping to the side,
going towards me, like and I end up sort of twisted in my seat over to that. But anyway, that was what annoyed me on the flight back from Ibiza. But we're back now, and
got to let it go, mate.
I am going to let it go.
You've got to let it go. That's weird. I mean, that doesn't annoy me. It doesn't. I got nothing to add to that apart from I can't imagine. I don't know. I don't know what to say.
Some people listen to this, it annoys them as well, and I bet they
really.
It's a weird sensation. It's not right. It's not right. I'm going to try and relax.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. There we go. So if anyone's listening and have had the same sort of hair tickling experience, then drop Mark a line because you two can share frustration there, but it doesn't worry me.
Spoiled my flight, that did.
Touch my arm as much as you like, really. I don't really bother.
Right,
let's have a break because we've got a great interview actually lined up, which we haven't spoken about to this point. With I went up to see Simon Scott, who was actually fishing at the time, and I thought, what can I talk to Scotty about? You know, things that really are interesting stuff. Interesting for me, might not be interesting for listeners. So I wanted to talk to Scotty about fish behaviour and some things that probably are not associated with Scotty so much, but all links to observation, fish behaviour, fish biology and the way fish feed and what they do when food's in the mouth, etc, etc. So I grilled him on that for a good hour, and I was pleased to say, even Scotty doesn't know everything, but he's a hugely knowledgeable man on all things carp. But a couple of questions which wasn't scripted. I don't show Simon what I'm going to ask him, but what I did ask him was a few things that actually I think even Scotty had to have a second thought about to answer the question, and hopefully it made for interesting listening. So without further ado, should we get Scotty on?
Yeah, mate, I'm going to go and wind my rod in because obviously it's been sabotaged up there somehow. I reckon you snapped my point off. I'm going to go and re-flick that one out, maybe onto the spot that you was fishing earlier.
Yeah, hurry up, poach it up.
And but I'm so looking forward to listening to this Scotty one. He's just a mine of information, and we don't give him underarm questions, do we? We try and surprise him with a few things as well.
I did that. I just tried to surprise him and get him out of his comfort zone, which is difficult because he knows so much.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, without further ado, then let's get Scotty on, and you go and do that rod.
Yep, will do. Good man.
Well, welcome back to the podcast, Simon.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for having me again.
Yeah, so it's always a pleasure. And you might not know this, but you probably don't actually. But obviously, we're well past a year's worth of podcasts now. So I think we're well past the double figures, and you'll be pleased to know that I think it was your second episode is the most downloaded episode in our library.
Well, I told my dad, please don't keep downloading it to your separate devices, Dad. It's getting a bit embarrassing. But I must remember to thank him for his enthusiastic downloading.
What's really strange, and it has been strange since me and Mark started this podcast, is that when you look at your download locations around the world, it gets downloaded in every nook and cranny in the world that you would least expect it.
Well, the Scott family is very widespread, and obviously when I've done a podcast, I always text everybody and say, please download.
I see. So there's a method behind the madness.
What's the most obscure spot then I've had a download?
Wow.
If you say Australia, that makes a lot of sense.
No, they're the we get lots.
They're common as muck in Australia.
Yeah, they're common.
Well, no.
I've got a few friends in Australia as well, so it's, they download and share the content. We have a couple of downloads. Mongolia, we've had it all around Asia. India, we get regular downloads. We get them in. An interesting one was Kyrgyzstan.
Okay.
Like when you think there's no, I'm assuming there's no sort of decent carp fishing in Kyrgyzstan, but yeah, I don't know.
Maybe a military connection there. Maybe it's some of our servicemen fishing overseas or away from home and they want something to listen to.
Yeah, I do notice that there's obviously a big following from the military guys, and they must be in Afghanistan. We get a lot of downloads.
Yeah, okay.
So I can see that. That makes sense. Maybe people travelling around Asia and Thailand, we get a lot of that. Loads, quite a few in China, so maybe their fascination with carp and whatnot, I don't know.
Yeah, well, they eat a lot of them.
But yeah, so the most downloaded episode, so I'm pleased to have you back on.
Oh, fantastic, good stuff.
And on this episode, Si, obviously it's a bit different to the last episode that you kindly did for us. I want to maybe focus on carp behavior.
Okay.
And not just carp behavior, but how the genetic makeup of carp works. And I've asked a couple of questions actually. So in terms of people that are that are friends and that are experienced anglers, I asked them what's a burning subject that they'd love to ask you if you had the opportunity. And there was a regular theme, and I wouldn't mind kicking off with that if that's okay. And it was, what happens when a carp takes what it assumes is a food object into its mouth?
Okay, well, that's a very good question, Mike. So let's start off with the carp is a member of the cyprinid family, and the cyprinid fish, that family, which is a very big and very diverse family of fish, which ranges from very small fish to really quite big specimens. Within that family, we see what we call the protrusible mouth, so this extendable mouth. So if you think about the mouth of a carp, when you hook it, you can pull the lips forward into it, or they form a tube, and that is designed for benthic feeding or bottom feeding. Now the mouth structure of a carp is a very beautifully designed bit of kit. So you've got the barbels on the outside for a carp that we fish for, Saprinus carpio. There are 4 barbels, 2 on the bottom lip, 2 on the top lip, and they're effectively like our tongues. So they're absolutely covered in taste buds. So when the fish is feeding in sediment, now bear in mind this fish has evolved specifically to feed on bloodworm buried in the silt. Those barbels are pushed down into the debris. So if a fish is digging in the mud, it's pushing its nose down into the silt, and effectively you can imagine you had 4 tongues. They're poked down into the debris. They taste the food items. So for example, bloodworm, the carp can smell the bloodworm up in the water column. It smells scents of the bloodworm. It will then start digging about in the area where it perceives that scent to be the strongest, and those the 4 barbels are giving the carp, if you like, a fine tuning on its position. So if it pushes its head down into the debris, into the sediment, it can taste the bloodworm in the silt. It then draws a big mouthful of that sediment up into its mouth, so it sucks it up using the gill structure. It creates a vacuum and draws that in. Now what's happening inside the fish's mouth is quite complicated. In the roof of the mouth there's something called the palatine or palatal organ. Now that effectively is a very, very highly sensitive organ that has little finger-like projections on it which trap food items. So when the carp sucks the food in, sediment and food, bloodworm, those little protrusions trap the bloodworm against the floor of the mouth. So they're basically trapped. The fish will then try and backwash some of the sediment away, and what effectively it's doing is it's cleaning the dirt off the food that it's picked up. It will then, once the food's been cleaned, it will pass it back in the throat to the throat teeth or pharyngeal teeth.
Yep.
And now obviously with bloodworm they don't need a lot of crushing up, but with snails and swan mussels they require quite a lot of breaking up. So to break, it's no good swallowing a swan mussel whole, you want to break it up before you swallow it. So once it's been crushed in the pharyngeal teeth, is then passed back into the gut through the esophagus. Now, within the gill structure of the fish, there's also something which we call the branchial sieve, which is a very fine mechanism which allows the fish to effectively, again, filter the food that's going through its mouth. So if you have a carp in a glass aquarium, for example, and you put sand in the bottom of the tank, let's say children's playthings, it sits on the bottom, and if you put tiny food items like pellets on that, little tiny pellets, you'll see the fish hoovering up the pellets and sand, and you'll see bits of sand falling out the back of the branchial sieve. So the actual mouth structure of the carp is beautifully designed to sieve out reasonably very small food items from the debris that it's swallowing, or picking up, or hoovering up rather. Now, what's amazing is that a carp, that research has shown that carp feeding in thick silt that's taking bloodworm swallows less than 10% of the unwanted debris with its food. So it's able to wash off 90+% of the rubbish, the black sediment that's in amongst the bloodworm. Eventually, obviously, it does swallow some, but most of it's left behind, so it backwashes it out, or it comes out of the gills.
It's an absolute mind-bending statistic.
Yeah, so the actual palatal organ and the branchial sieve, it's just incredibly beautifully adapted for feeding in sediment. And having dissected some carp over the years and looked at that, and actually you can stimulate the palatine organ with a sharp seeker, a pointer. You can see these tiny little finger-like protrusions, and they're like the best description I read in one of the textbooks was like fingers poking through the material that you make a balloon with. So you imagine if you had a bit of balloon, you stretched it out and you pushed it, you like played the piano on it effectively, your fingers would create these little projections, and that is effectively what's trapping the bloodworm in the floor of the fish's mouth.
So that is in the roof of the mouth?
The palatine organ's in the roof, and it traps it against the underside of the mouth, Wow. And then you've got the branchial sieve, so that food items are being hoovered up, they're trapped, and then the rubbish passes out through the branchial sieve, and then they can backwash it. So, it's incredible. It's amazing how efficient it is. So when I've been in the past playing about with feeding fish on different pellets and looking at their preferences, I quite quickly discovered that you could get a tub of 4mm carp pellets or coarse fish pellets, and you could mix them with a tub of 4mm salmon pellets, mix the two together. Now obviously one of those is far more calorific, more rich, if you like. It's more like a processed food. It's a more calorific food source than the other. So the carp diet is quite bland, not very flavoursome, although it's probably perfectly good for carp to eat. It's designed for carp. The salmon pellet is very nutrient dense, it's very calorific and very oily, and carp love the taste. So you mix those two together and you put them out on the bottom of a tank, and you'll watch the fish come in. They'll hoover up the pellets. Now they hoover up the whole lot, but literally in one split second of movement within the oral cavity, they are able to sort the pellets out, and they blow out the carp pellets and then eat the salmon pellets first.
Wow.
Then once they've eaten all the salmon pellets, they eat the carp pellets.
Really?
Yeah.
And are these the same size food items?
Yeah, identical. So 4mm salmon pellet, 4mm carp pellet mixed together. Pet fish that I've observed, they could able to suck it up, sort it out, and blow it out. So in literally a split second, as quickly as I can turn my hand around when I'm talking to you.
That's amazing.
Yeah, but that makes sense if you think they're designed to, a 40-pound carp is beautifully designed to feed on tiny little bloodworm buried in the sediment. So it's their feeding apparatus is incredibly well designed. And to take that on a bit further, researchers have shown that bream in a tank, and I say bream, I know a lot of the anglers at this point, the carp anglers that are listening to this are probably all cringing, but a bream is a cyprinid just the same as a carp, so the feeding apparatus is very similar. And what bream are being shown to do, and there's no reason to believe that carp don't do exactly the same thing, is if you set up an aquarium and you mark out the bottom into a quadrant, so there's squares, and you bury a bloodworm in those quadrants, bream will go around and they'll sample the sediment in the various areas of the tank, and what they'll end up doing is they then concentrate their feeding on the area where the bloodworm is richest.
And they know, obviously, just from sampling the debris.
They bury their heads into the sediment, they suck up the sand and bloodworm mix. They know they can very quickly go, right, there's a few there, there's a few here, there's a few over there, but this is the best spot. And of course then they concentrate their feeding effort on the best spot. And we know that carp do exactly the same thing out in the lake. So when you're watching carp moving around, or if they're bloodworm feeding, they will be harvesting the very richest areas all the time. It's about maximising the food return for the effort you put in. Now I always said to my students when we used to, when I was teaching, if I buried packed lunches all over this patch of grass which we're sat beside, and I buried them spread out across the grass, and I buried them, let's say, 2 feet in the daytime, but at night they came up to the surface. It wouldn't take you very long to suss that the time to pick up those packed lunches buried beneath the turf was in the dark.
Yeah.
Now, if you think about what bloodworm do in a lake environment, this is quite interesting. So bloodworm move their position in the sediment depending on the oxygen content. So during the daytime, when the oxygen levels are high, the bloodworm, he doesn't want to get eaten, so he buries itself nice and deep into the sediment.
Yeah.
At night, when oxygen in the water is dropping down, the same bloodworm goes, oh no, I'm running out of oxygen, so he has to come to the surface of the silt to survive, because obviously they need oxygen to survive.
Yeah, yeah.
Of course, carp that are bloodworm feeding are very often night feeders.
Okay.
Makes perfect sense, because why would they want to dig for packed lunches in the middle of the day when they can pick them up off the surface at night?
Yeah, it's an amazing analogy, and it makes perfect sense. And I wonder, I've often looked through my fishing diary especially over the last sort of, decade, and the volume of night bites, and it might be linked to oxygen, but the volume of night bites has been, I can probably count on one hand. Now, I'm fishing the bloodworm-rich lakes,
okay.
And I just wonder if the carp are so tuned into feeding on the bloodworm at night, and then come by the morning when the bloodworm are like, stuff this, we're going down deep.
Yeah.
There's an easier meal in terms of my bait. I don't know.
Yeah, it's very easy to simplify, and people will listen to this and think, oh, that applies to my lake. But oxygen is so important, and a carp is not going to feed if it's compromised for oxygen.
Yeah.
If the oxygen is low, it is not going to want to feed. The process of feeding is energetic.
Yeah.
It involves digging about in the silt. If you're short of oxygen, you're out of breath, you don't want to do something else that's energetic. So maybe although they're bloodworm waters, they're feeding on the day on different food perhaps. So they'll pick and choose their times. First light is often a very good time. If you think about that, the light levels are increasing, the plants are starting to photosynthesize, and as that happens, very quickly you get a rise in the oxygen in the water. So it's very stimulatory to the fish to feed.
Yeah.
You can mock that up on the fish farm. So if we turn the aerators on, and they've been, let's say the aeration on some of the ponds has been off for a few days, if I turn it on, that agitation actually means you get more oxygen into the water, and often the fish become very agitated and active after that, and it's that rise in oxygen is like a big stimulation to them.
Oh, that's great. And I think you spoke about fish understanding and being able to home in on the most nutrient rich part of the lake, or the most nutrient rich part of their natural food source. Do you think that rings true? And you may have seen evidence of this, because in the bait world, obviously you've got a spectrum of baits, haven't you? Yeah. You've got baits that are, some baits are, when you look at the nutritional value of some baits, they're pretty crap. But other baits are very good, and obviously a carp can't really determine that until it started eating it. But do you think, is there ever any evidence that carp will pick a nutritionally rich bait over a poor quality bait? I don't know, it's hard.
Good question. I mean, one of my favourite baits is I'm sure you're aware, Mike, sweet corn. I'm also a great fan of tiger nuts, and there's question marks over both of those baits in terms of their nutritional value to the fish, although certainly European fish farmers use a lot of maize, and it seems to do the fish a lot of good. That's possibly not a great example, but I think if you're baiting up over a long period, you want to use the best quality bait you can. So a bait that is nutritionally complete, a complete diet for the fish, is going to stand the test of time if you're baiting the same spot over and over and over and over. And of course, I think, for me personally, I like to think that when I bait a spot up, I'm trying to catch a fish, but I also like to think the fish that come in and have food off it, I don't catch it, doing all right off the back of me as well. So I like to think that I'm helping them along their way. I'm giving them a bit of a treat as well.
Yeah, no, we don't catch them all, do we?
No, definitely not.
Well, thinking of that mechanism, of the way that you just described them feeding and stiff the feeding, and the way that they process their food, how does that come into play when you think of rig mechanics? Because in the nanosecond they can spit, you said, a less nutritious pellet out. Surely as soon as a hook goes in their mouth, the alienation of the metal or something, they're going to know, aren't they, right?
Great use of alienation, Mike. I like it. Okay, so I think I've written about this in the past. If I was, this is going to sound a little bit quirky to the listeners, but if I'm giving Mike strawberries out of a bowl, you like strawberries, don't you, Mike?
Yeah, like any food, really.
So I'm passing you strawberries one after another, and you're not looking at them, you're just putting them in your mouth. And after 5 or 6, you're thinking, yeah, these strawberries that you grew, Simon, they are delicious, and you're chomping them down nice and quick. And then I give you one with a stalk. How quickly are you going to know it's got a stalk in it?
Yeah, it's a nanosecond, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
And I didn't even have to look at that.
No, you don't have to look at it. You know, you can feel it in your mouth. It's responding differently. It doesn't feel right. It's not the same texture. Now, if you're fishing for carp and it picks up a boilie, and it's picked up 1,000 boilies in its life, or a great sweet corn, or a tiger nut, that has a certain way in which it acts within the mouth. It travels in a certain way. If it's attached to an anchor and a bit of string, it doesn't act in the same way. So instantly, that bait is not acting the same in the fish's mouth.
Yeah.
And I think there is a moment then when the fish sucks it up and it must think, that doesn't feel right. It's not moving right.
Yeah.
Now, that's one of the things I think, you know, I'm quite keen on fishing in the sort of not quite so gravelly clean areas, fishing maybe in the more dirty areas, is if you're fishing in silty debris on the bottom, it must be harder for a carp to suss that moment out. If it's feeding on clean gravel and it's picking up individual boilies one after another, they're all very, very same, they're a uniform,
they're clean,
it sucks them up off the bottom, the gravel stays put, the boilie goes in, it pushes it back to the pharyngeal teeth to start chewing it and on to the next one. If, however, it's doing the same thing in debris and silt on the bottom, there's bits of stick and leaf litter and all that rubbish, that must be a lot harder for those fish to suck that up and then go, oh, straight away there's not something quite right there.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, so the other thing I think we before we started recording this, you mentioned bite-offs, and they don't happen anymore. I think if you go back in sort of carp fishing development, we historically, likes of Rod Hutchinson, we're using big beds of particles, and actually you could sort of see how a bite-off could occur if you had a long hook link, and you'd actually hooked the bait onto the hook rather than on a hair rig. So the fish sucks the bait up. It's on a long hook link. It pushes it back to the pharyngeal teeth. It chews that up and then swallows it and swims off. And of course, by that point, it's damaged the hook link, and you might get a bite, and then ping, gone.
Yeah, well, you're right. I think the birth of the hair rig absolutely revolutionised the catch ratio, but of course then you've got this bare piece of metal, which in terms of carp terms, in terms of detectable, they can detect it instantly. But if, as you say, you're side hooking a bait or you're burying the bait in the side of the bait, when that touches the area that you've just described, it's going to be very difficult for the carp to think that that's not something they want to kick back and digest in the gut.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting one. I think particularly now we've got I've been using a lot of the Korda Kamakura hooks that have newly released, and they're just insanely sharp. I think we're using rigs that are more and more efficient now. The sort of dynamics of how they twist and turn in the fish's mouth. I think we've made it harder for the fish to pick up our bait, and a fish that's hoovered up a bait is at a great risk of being caught. And particularly if you can get the feeding situation where they're moving about a little bit, they're not sat on one spot. If they're moving a bit around the feeding area, then they're very, very vulnerable with the rigs and the hooks that we're using now to getting hooked. I mean, there's no question, having played about with pet fish, that a fish sucks up a hook, a blunt hook, and it pricks it. They just stop and they shake it out and carry on like nothing's ever happened.
Well, that's really interesting.
I've watched that stalking as well. I've seen it with very sharp hooks and heavy leads. I've placed rigs, little single balanced tiger nut, 4-inch hook links, size 6 hooks, massive great flat pair leads. Put them in. I've watched fish hoover up the hook bait and thought, go on. And you see the lead move on the bottom, and then the fish just a little twitch of its head, and out comes the tiger nut, and then it carries on feeding. And you think, it's completely done me. Now, was it thinking I picked up a rig, or was it just thinking there's something sharp in my mouth? Because if you imagine feeding on the bottom of the lake with your lips, there are going to be sharp stones, bits of bramble, briar, sticks, all sorts of debris. It must be part and parcel of their everyday feeding experience. Picking up something.
Yeah, sharp edges of swan mussels, pea mussels.
So they must get little pricks in their lips all the time that they think, ow, and just suck blow and on to the next bit. Maybe they don't think, oh my God, that was a size 4 quarter hook.
So I wonder, there's an element of rig mechanics that at some point they panic.
Yeah.
Because that's the classic carp run.
Yeah, I think the very, very, very best feeding situation is carp moving about. And I'm a massive advocate of fishing a hook bait just off the baited area, a single hook bait.
Yeah.
And because I think then fish that are leaving the baited area won't take that, because they've already got their buccal, their oral cavities full of food. They've already hoovered up as much food as they can. They're swimming off the baited area, chewing, and as they go, they're chewing bait. Bits of particles of food might be falling out the gills or back out through the mouth if they've been very greedy. They go off on a bit of a route to chew up that food, and then once they've finished that, they start to come back towards the baited area. They're dropping in the water towards the baited area, and there's a little white pop up. Oh, there's one. Yeah. In it goes. The fish is travelling. Bang. Hook link straight in a second. The damage is done.
Yeah.
Though in my experience, a rig fished a couple of rod lengths off the baited area seems to catch me more fish than maybe 1 or 2 rigs right in the middle of the baited area.
Yeah, brilliant. I'm sure that I've noticed that through observations as well. So, you know, when a carp naturally comes into a baited area, very rarely do you see them plough straight into the middle of the baited area.
No.
Start from the outside and come in.
Yeah, so if you're stalking, I find it's great. You position your rig just to the side of the baited area. Hopefully you're going to be the first bait it picks up on the way back into the spot. And of course, if it's travelling, a moving fish, it's much. You can think of those super tankers we talk about, you know, in the Gulf that are moving that oil up and down. They can't stop very quickly, and the carp, you know, big carp's the same thing. If he's moving, it's very difficult to sort of ground the anchors on instantly. So once it's actually stopped and is on the bottom and sucking food up, if it picks up a big there, it's much easier for it to spit it back out again than it is when it's travelling. Interesting. So, I mean, what's fascinated me as well, especially with rig mechanics, is that, and especially because obviously I've had an insight from talking to you over the years as well about the carp's cavity and how they decide for food, etc. It fascinates me how we don't hook them a little bit further back in the mouth. I mean, a lot of the rigs now are designed just on the lip, at the bottom lip, in the corner of the lip, but because of their processing their food a bit further back than the edge of the lips, I'm amazed we don't hook them in the fleshy tissue. I think a lot of the problem is, Mike, that within the procedural mouth, that tissue is very soft, and actually the hook tears through that. Okay. You want to be hooking in the bottom lip. That's the target. That is the hardest bit of the mouth of the fish. I mean, I've hooked fish further back, and you can see where the hook has actually it's travelled forward a bit to the harder tissue in the mouth. Yeah. So that's the target, is the bottom lip. You want to be slap bang in the middle.
We don't want to hook them.
You don't really want to be hooking them further back, because I think you run the risk of the hook moving more during the fight. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's incredible. And in terms of carp feeding, you know, we often talk about they're built for their environment and they capitalise on the easiest food source. Yeah. And of course, some are tuned into bait, and that is the easiest food source. And other lakes, unfortunately, are so sterile with lack of natural food that bait is their only food source.
Yeah, it can be that case. Yeah.
And I just, you've got some great experiences, haven't you, about fish feeding on some quite obscure food items, and we spoke a little bit about off tape about your experience of fish feeding on swan mussels. And when I think of a swan mussel, you know, that's the size of a small teacup.
Yeah, but not all, like carp, not all swan mussels start the size of a teacup.
Of course.
I mean, carp, no question, carp will eat young juvenile swan mussels. They do. It's quite interesting because swan mussels, their offspring, are planktivorous, and they settle out in the gills of carp. So you will, if you don't get carp gills, you'll often find the juvenile swan mussels in the gills.
Really?
Yeah.
And have they been eaten? Or
no, they're living on the gill structure.
Okay.
And they're sort of semi-parasitic. They're not living off the fish. They're hitching a ride in the gill, and then they drop out and settle on the bottom. So it's a two-way street, the swan mussel thing. But once the swan mussel settles on the bottom, you know, it's the size of a 50p piece. That is inherently very vulnerable to being eaten by a carp. I did a vintage on a lake in France called Villadon. It was a good long time ago now. And on the dam wall, there's a really big dam wall, and it was made up of these big loose boulders. And in amongst the cracks between the stones were all these swan mussels. In the lake, you couldn't find a single solitary swan mussel. The carp had eaten the whole lot, but the adult swan mussels were all living wedged in amongst the rocks, and obviously the carp couldn't get to them there. So I don't have any doubt that they eat them. Additionally, in the past, I've caught carp that, while they've been in the sling, have actually passed swan mussel shells out through the vent, broken up, so they've been crushed. Yeah. But they've actually passed them. And I put in one particular case, I caught a fish that was an upper 20. It was a real deep gutty fish, and when I had it in the sling, and I was just about to take the pictures, actually, it was producing feces out of the vent, and these bits of shell came out, and I thought, my God, it's swan mussel. And I thought, that must be horrendous to pass.
I was going to think, that's like eye-watering thought.
Anyway, after I'd taken the photos and put the fish back, I put the shell together, and it was, you know, the shell was probably 10 centimetres across. You could literally, the whole swan mussel, it must have passed it back to its throat teeth, chewed it up, swallowed the whole lot, and carried on.
Blimey, I mean, that's That's I know that that's crazy, but it's the reality of the natural world that the carp live in. Because a friend of mine sent me a video of that very same thing only about a month ago.
Yeah.
He said, look at this. He's opened the sack, and there was a chunk of swan mussel coming out of a carp's vent that just looked like a big lump of broken glass.
Yeah.
And it's huge. This swan mussel, I can imagine in its original state was the size of the palm of my hand.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question they do eat them and they do crush them up. And snail shells are the same. You think of shards. You imagine chewing up large freshwater snails, swallowing them down, and then passing out those bits of shell would be an unpleasant experience. But that is what carp do. I mean, it's very, very common. I'm seeing a lot of that now. There's in the lake I'm fishing a bit at the moment. There's a particular species of snail that they clearly are hammering them. And when they're in this retention sling, when I get my camera ready, often they get a bit of shell past, and you can see exactly which species it is. And
really?
The bits are all there, and they're broken up. And you think that must be so uncomfortable, but that's what they do.
Do you think it's long been documented, isn't it, that carp are attracted also by noise when they're eating?
Yeah, no question. Now I've set this up at home actually, so you can see that they are attracted to the noise of another fish chewing.
Yes.
Now, one thing when I had an aquarium at the foot of my bed, I used to have a big 4-foot aquarium, and I used to grow fish in there, and I'd grow them up to about 4 or 5 pounds in it. And what I realised you could do is you could put in a crunchy food item like a very big floating pellet or like a tiger nut, and you could hear the fish crunching it up. So I could turn the air pump off, so there's that sort of humming noise that starts to listen. And you clearly hear sort of as the fish were chewing up the food items. And one thing I'm absolutely certain, I set it up in the garden where I've tried it, is the fish hear each other, and if one fish is chewing, there's definitely all the others are like, excuse me, what's going on here? So, I mean, one of the reasons why tiger nuts seem to be quite popular was because other fish could hear fish chewing them up, and I think there's probably a lot to be said for that. Their interaction within a lake of a group of fish, even if they're spread over an acre, is quite close. They're aware of each other's presence. Each fish is giving off a scent as it travels through the water, so they know where other fish have swum through. They can hear 100%. They can hear each other. So there's a lot of interaction, even when they're not right side by side. They're aware of each other.
Oh, it's fascinating. I didn't realise that. So I didn't realise there was a kind of, what is it, like a hormone that gets given off.
Well, I think if you think about a carp when you've caught a carp, the mucus that's on your unhooked mat and your landing has a smell, doesn't it? Yeah. You go home, that's the smell of success. But if they're travelling through a lake, that mucus is sloughing off the skin all the time. They're producing mucus to replace that which is lost. So as they travel through their environment, they are leaving that scent behind.
Wow.
And now bear in mind, we smell a pop-up, go, cool, that smells amazing, it smells a crab or it smells a squid or whatever. But for a carp, it's travelling through its weed, let's say it's travelling through the weed, it's leaving mucus on the weed stems. And of course the next carp that comes along can smell that. It's no different to a dog following another dog across a park, with his nose down.
Yeah. Do you think as well then, we're diversing into all areas here, which is I'm finding it absolutely fascinating. We all see carp flanking.
Yeah.
Now we know that sometimes the textbook would say that they're flanking to get rid of a parasite, or they're getting just to scratch an itch. But do you think as well maybe they're scenting an area?
No, I don't. I think with flanking, it is parasite driven. I don't think they're it's not like a dog cocking its leg on a tree.
Yeah.
But I think when you see flanking, that behaviour is associated with parasites in particular. So, for example, leeches, arglis, the fish louse, and smaller parasites, little protozoan parasites that are harder to see with the naked eye. Now, a healthy carp may well have quite a high number of parasites on it, particularly if the water's warm during the summer. But the fish's immune system is dealing with that. It's a healthy fish. It's fighting off an infection. And if obviously carp, unlike ourselves, if we get something, if you've got an itch in your hair, you scratch it. But a carp can't do that. And if you've got a parasite, which let's say if we look at the fish louse, it's got a very sharp, like hypodermic needle, which it's piercing the fish's skin with. That is going to irritate you. And when you're actively moving around in your aquatic world and there's a parasite itching your back because it's taking bites out of you, how do you deal with that? Well, you can't scratch it with your hands because you don't have any. So what they do is they flank. Another thing that they do is, so if we take, for example, a bit of a branch or something, they might flank on that, which will knock that parasite off. Another thing which 100% they use a lot is clay, and I see that massively at the farm, and in particular they like certain types of clay that are more tacky than others. Now if you are a parasite adhered to the side of a fish, that has got to be your worst nightmare, that your host discovers a patch of clay it's got a tackiness to it. He then flanks hard against it, and as a little parasite, all of a sudden you've got a face full of clay, you can't breathe, so you let go. Perfect, makes perfect sense. So they love clay. In my experience from fishing at Raisby and places, glass bottles were always very popular at Raisby. They like the glass.
Glass?
I guess the surfaceness must be sufficient to knock a parasite off. The other thing they absolutely love, we see it a lot at the fish farm, is the old French drains, the clay pipes. And they're about maybe 12, 14 inches long, and they're made of clay like you'd use it at school in your pottery classes, but rolled round like a sausage roll shape. And the fish at the farm, if you put one of those on the bottom of a pond, fill the pond up, grow the fish for a year, in the autumn when you drain it down, there will be a ring around that pipe, and they would have flanked on it and flanked on it and flanked on it. And again, if you imagine a parasite, that must be like being brushed against sandpaper. It's going to just take you straight off.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
So that, it's how they're ridding themselves of parasites.
Right.
Another way they do it, of course, is jumping. So we see this again at the farm. I know where the rubbing spots are in some of the ponds, because they're the same old spots they use year after year. And what you'll often see when the fish are very active is that they will jump often above a rubbing spot. So you imagine you're irritated, there's something biting into your dorsal line, you can't scratch it with your hand, so you roll, you flank, you're trying to knock it off. Then if that's not working, you come up and you crash, so you're landing on your back or your side to try and dislodge that parasite.
And as an angler, we're thinking, yes,
you're thinking, they get their heads down. Well, of course they give themselves away like that, but that if you're a little parasite, you have to stay on that fish, because if you get dislodged and knocked off in a big lake like this one, then you're lost. You're never going to find another host. That's the end. So they're hanging on for dear life, and the fish are doing their very best to dislodge you.
So sometimes you see those aerial displays where you think, blimey, like dolphins out there. And the reality is, I think now, experience tells us over the years, you kind of get to know, if you've fished for a number of years, you kind of get to know what's a feeding behaviour, kind of sticking their nose out and
head and shoulder,
compared to absolutely porpoising like a dolphin.
Yeah, they're absolutely thrashing themselves out, and I think that's not feeding behaviour. What I'd like to see most is when they just poke their nose out and they're just backwashing the gills, like they're feeding in the sediment. Is perfect.
That's game on, isn't
That's
it?
game on for a bite. That
you're sat there thinking, I'm going to see what happens.
Come on, the right hand rod.
Oh, it's fascinating. So one thing that has sprung to mind there when you're talking about the pharyngeal teeth, and again, I don't claim to know anything in terms of carp biology to the degree that you guys know, but I'm thinking, when a carp is born, how quickly, bear with me on this one, how quickly does it take for the pharyngeal teeth to grow to kind of allow them to crunch up food? So where I'm going with this, would a young fish avoid a crunchy food item because their pharyngeal teeth aren't quite developed?
Mike, that's a good question. No, I'll be totally honest, I have no idea when their pharyngeal teeth start to develop. However, to flip it over to a different species, I have dissected rudd and roach, which would probably be, I'm putting my fingers out here and trying to imagine the size of them, but maybe 5 to 7 centimetres long, so pretty small rudd, and they have got pharyngeal teeth, and so do and the roach are the same, and chub are the same.
Okay.
So a long time ago, I did an exam at the Natural History Museum, and we had to, it was a fish ID exam, and you had to be able to identify freshwater fish. And one of the parts of that was looking at their various bone structures, including the pharyngeal teeth.
Right.
So I got quite adept at taking the pharyngeal teeth out of a very small rudd, a very small roach, a very small chub, to be able to tell them apart. And in the exam, we actually had to identify which fish the teeth came from. But no one ever shows. I always said, no one ever shows you a 40-pound carp. So I've caught this. I don't know what it is. What they show you is a sort of partially digested, chewed up bit of fish. And said, what was that? So that's what the skill was about. And it's So to go back to your original question, so little tiny rudd and roach bottom. So it's fair to say, by the time a carp is 5 centimetres long, it's got a set of pharyngeal teeth, then it will be able to crush up little pellets.
Amazing.
So quite early on in its life.
for those that don't know, how would you describe a stepfrangial teeth?
Oh, okay. Well, that's a very good question. They're different for different species. So cyprinid fish, that family, the carp family, have got pharyngeal teeth in some shape or form. And in some species they look very different. So for example, in a chub, they've got quite dagger-like pharyngeal teeth. So they're actually quite elongated and quite spiked. But in our carp that we're fishing for, the pharyngeal teeth are much more like our molars. They're quite flat, crushing plates. Now, they're actually on the underside. So the pharyngeal teeth are an adaptation of the last gill arch. So the last gill arch of the fish, rounded, and instead of going round to form a gill arch, they stop, and then there's a flat plate, and on those plates you've got these pharyngeal teeth that stand up.
Okay.
And there's a certain number on each side, and they crush up against a plate in the roof of the mouth called the masticatory plate, which is a bony triangle of hard tissue, and the teeth crush up against that. And if you watch a carp in your garden pond feeding, if you give it some pellet, if you watch it, you'll see its head just moving very slightly after it's got a mouthful of food.
Yeah, you do.
And that's the teeth forcing up against the plate in the roof of the mouth to crush the food.
Wow.
And as I said, you can actually hear them crushing it if you're that sad. You've got an underwater microphone.
No, I've seen it. That's why I
asked you. Hydrophone, they call that, Mike.
Oh, I don't think I can attach one of those to my rig, mate. I've seen it myself, and I'm sure many people have listening to this, where one fish will come in on the spot. It takes a mouthful, especially you've got hemp and a few crunchy items there, and as it takes off to kind of chew its food, because oddly, quite common practice, isn't it, for a carp to go away from the spot to chew?
Yeah, definitely.
They like to kind of go away from where they're feeding to chew their food. And I don't know why, I have no idea, but that seems to be the observations. And as it does a loop, or wherever it's going to chew its food, often it'll come back with another one.
Yeah.
So clearly the noise is attractive.
Yeah, the noise and the body language as well. They are watching each other. Let's say it's a loose group of fish drifting along a margin. All of a sudden, one of the group peels back, comes away from the marginal shelf back into the group, and it's chewing. There's a noise which we've talked on. It's clearly chewing something. It's giving off crackling noises under the water, which carp we know have got fantastic hearing can hear. Also, the other fish will be able to see that it's chewing if the water's clear.
Yeah.
So they'll see that it's chewing, and then often there'll be a scent around the fish is giving off a scent, because in the oral cavity it's chewing up its food. There'll be smell of hemp and tiger nuts and pellets and boilies coming out, and so other fish go, "Ooh, what are you chewing?" And then it'll come back to the spot, and of course it's been followed by 2 or 3 more. And of course, if you're stalking, then that's a fantastic situation. That's what you want. That build up of fish on the spot.
Yeah.
They're starting to compete, and when they're starting to compete, they're not so careful, and they start barging each other. And when they're barging each other, it becomes very difficult to carefully pick up a rig if you're being pushed by a fish beside you. And that's the situation you're really looking for, isn't it? And that's when they slip up.
That's perfect. I think, because when you're in that situation, I think I'm imagining it that the carp get a little bit like, I want that food, get out the way. I want to eat as much as I can, because otherwise you're going to eat it. And the guard gets dropped, and the fish come in, and the aggressive feeding starts. And you talk about carp are easier to catch when you've got a 2, 3, 4, 5, and they're coming in on the spot. And all that jostling for position.
Yeah.
All works in the angler's favour.
Oh, massively. And you imagine if you're a single fish feeding on that spot, you can drop to the bottom, suck up a mouthful of food. You don't have to go anywhere. You can just roll it round in your mouth, suck up a bit more, roll it round, suck up a bit more, roll it. If there's anything suspicious there, you just go blow it all back out.
Yeah.
That changes completely when there's 4 or 5 of you, and as you say, you're jostling for position. You suck up a mouthful of food, someone to your right side gives you a shunt, and before you know it, wham, the hook's in.
Yeah.
And then woof, off you go.
Well, that's you'll know the guy I'm going to refer to here, so I won't mention his name. But he, I don't know what you think about this crazy statement, but I'm going to put it out there.
Mark Bryan, he's
well,
God.
He's
God.
There. He's out there. He's a bit crazy, but this isn't Mark. Somebody that we both know is convinced that, like humans, carp have got a left and a right hand, and they prefer to feed either coming in onto the left or coming in onto the right. Any evidence?
Ooh, that's a great observation. I can't say. I'm just trying to think quickly. Again, Mike's just asked me this question straight off, so I haven't got no time to think on it for a second.
Just wonder if you have any experience of fish.
I do see fish doing the same patterns of feeding. So, for example, in my garden pond, some of my pets do the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over. They're literally doing exactly the same routine. You see the same thing at the farm. well. So
Okay.
I can't say, oh yeah, definitely left or definitely right, but they have a certain way that they tend to approach things, and
Yeah.
it seems to be the same pattern each time. Thinking about fish that I've watched, yeah. So I could see that. I could definitely see that.
We
yeah.
don't think about that in terms of a fish, do we? Because humans are left or right-handed, and we have a preference to sides naturally because that's the way genetically we're built. And when you look at carp at the edge as well, they often come in on the spot the same way.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it seems too coincidental that some carp always come in off the right or always come in off the left, and especially if you're fishing a lake that they're individual carp, there's not many of them, and you get to know their habits, I see it too often to be coincidence.
No, I think you'd be right, Mike. I mean, listen, there's a massive amount about our quarry that we don't really fully understand, and it's because you can't say to them, how was that for you, or how was the experience of getting caught. We're only trying to piece things together. Now, yes, of course, globally there's 4 million tonnes of carp gets eaten every year. Yes, they're farmed on an enormous scale for food for humans. Yes, we spend a lot of time fishing. Yes, we can film them underwater. Yes, we can watch them from up trees coming in our spots and getting caught. But there's a massive amount we can't really ever really get our heads around and understand. We're only trying to piece the puzzle together, if you like. And this is a very complicated creature, and there's a lot to it. They don't enjoy getting caught as well, so they will avoid that, and they'll learn tricks to avoid it. And that's why anybody that does something a bit off the cuff, whether it's a rig or a bait, can sometimes make it seem very easy, because if you do something, I read an article recently by Kev Hewitt, and he's obviously an extremely competent catcher of carp and has caught so many huge fish, and he said in the article, he said, if someone says to you that spodding doesn't work here, he said, for me that's just like it's like a go to spodding.
Yeah.
If something doesn't work, then that's his thing to try. It's because if you can do something that's totally different, then often they become very easy to catch, because you're basically making it impossible for them. They haven't learned that trick.
We've conditioned them as anglers, haven't we?
And you can, conditioning is a really good choice of word, because you can condition them at the farm to feed on the same spot every single morning. You can condition them to the noise of a truck. In fact, so much so with the noise of a feed wagon that I have harvested a pond of fish, I've taken them back to the fish house, graded them. I've then taken a certain number of those fish and put them in a different pond on the farm. 2 days later, I've driven past it with the same truck, and they come chasing after it like they're going to get fed. So they are remembering that noise and thinking, oh, that's the feed truck.
Yeah.
So that is a conditioned behaviour.
Well, I'm a big advocate, and I think about pre-baiting.
Yeah, 100%.
Once you get to that conditioning of them to recognise food in an area, and the time that you pre-bait, I think, is very, very important, because if you go into the effort to pre-bait, then I'm a great believer in the time that you do it. It helps too, because you're conditioning them on time and location. It's very easy, not easy, but sometimes it doesn't work, but quite often it does, and you condition them to arrive almost like at the ring of the bell. Yeah,
I think going back to the time when I fished at Raysbury, which was an amazing lake to fish, and as I've alluded to in the past, you could use boats there. And one thing I found that was what I used to do is reel in at about lunchtime, so midday-ish, and then I'd stash my gear and I'd go off in my boat with a bag of bait, and I'd go and feed various spots around the lake. And there were several reasons for that. Firstly, I was effectively conditioning the fish to find and like my food. Secondly, it enabled me to see which fish were in which areas of the lake. So often in the afternoons they'd be holed up in various snags around the lake, so you could go, right, such and such a fish, maybe Mary's mate is in this snag, maybe Mallin's is in that snag over there. So they were spread around the whole lake. It's a big area, 120 acres, and they would travel around it, and so you'd find them, you think, right, okay, there's a group here and a group there. And the other thing I found was that I could go in those snags after a certain amount of feeding. I could put on a bright white t-shirt, wave my arms around. The fish did not give two hoots. They could clearly see me, Mike. I was standing there, I took off my green shirt, I had a bright white one on, I waved my arms about, stamped my feet. They didn't spook at all. I then put boilies down the shelf, and they were taking them on the drop.
What
So
do you think
they
that
had
is?
been completely conditioned to having free food in that spot.
Safe free food.
Safe free food by the bloke on the bank. It didn't matter whether I was wearing camo green carpiness or whether I was wearing a go clubbing glow sticks type t-shirt. They could clearly see you. They knew that every day someone would drop in this area and put some boilies in, and they thought, oh, there he is. Why is he waving his arms about? Who cares? There's the food.
Amazing.
Yeah, and it makes perfect sense. And
Yeah,
of course,
it does, yeah.
by doing that pre-baiting, when they're out in the lake in prime feeding time, and never put so much food in the snags that they weren't going to go out. There's only ever a handful. But what happened was, of course, when they're out in the lake and they come across an area of the same bait, I know that tastes nice and that makes me feel good, so they'd wolf it down, bang, and I caught fish.
Amazing. Do you think then, you talk about fish, you talk about range, especially, and I know you mentioned this to me before off tape. Do you think carp, I guess certain carp, not all carp, because clearly not, but some are territorial?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, I do. And I think what you tend to find in a population, you get some carp that are transient fish that will move around the whole of their environment if the weather is warm and the conditions are right. So they're moving about around the lake and they're travelling up and down the lake. And I also think you get resident fish that like specific areas, and that can be reflected in captures. So some fish tend to get caught in the same area over and over and over and over again. Obviously they're resident fish, and there are other fish that get caught in the four corners of the lake. So I think you get different populations. And what determines that? Maybe the age, maybe the strain of the fish, maybe their background. But yes, certainly. And that was supported at Raysbury. I mean, there was a fish called measles, which had a certain area in particular. I used to live in the Finger Bays a lot. Dave Lane, I think it was, christened it the Finger Bay Mirror. Yeah. And that fish, which I've caught several times, but often it was caught in that area or close to it. So he was quite a regular in that area. So that fish did not like to travel out across the South Lake. Far too much like hard work.
And I guess it then rings naturally into the carp have personalities.
Massively. There's no question that there are cautious carp. There are carp that think, what the hell, I'm just going to go for it. Just like there are people, and I think you look at a population of people, you've got 100 people in a room, they can all be very, very different. I think it's exactly the same with 100 carp. If you have 100 carp, even from the same spawning, there are different characters within that group. So, very, very different. And you see that, and that's reflected in captures from the lake. You'll get some fish that just don't seem to care about being caught, and others that if they get caught, it's like the worst thing that's ever happened to them in a year, and they don't get seen for a long time. So there's a great variety, and that's what makes it interesting, isn't it? They're all it's that fabulous variety of the fish, and that makes it interesting, the mystery.
Yeah, I mean, at a lake, it's very difficult to work that out. On a fish farm, I'm sure you see it a lot quicker. You're going to see the fish that are charging for the food. You're going to see the cautious ones that might be shy, or especially in a tank, you're going to see it, magnified times 10. Yeah,
or in a garden pond. It's a really good example. Tank's very small. Fish farm often, the VS fisheries, the ponds, natural clay ponds. They're quite muddy. The water's quite coloured, so it can be difficult to see. But in garden pond situations, anybody that's got a garden pond listening to this and has a few carp, you'll see that they have different characters that do different stuff. Some fish will prefer pellet on the top. Some fish prefer food on the bottom. Some fish prefer yellow pellet. Some prefer green. Some prefer brown. So they've got personalities just the same as us.
Amazing. How you're making me think of some interesting and fascinating thoughts here. How good is a carp eyesight?
Oh, really, really good. I think they've got fabulous eyesight, particularly in clear water, in shallow clear water. So where you've got, for example, the sun beating down, and the water's crystal clear, then they've got very, very good eyesight. I did some messing about a long time ago now, but I was cutting the shank of a hook and just having the eye and the shank, and I was putting that on stand in a brightly lit aquarium, and the carp was swimming along and sucking that shank up. Really? So they thought it was food, because obviously it was contrasting the bottom of the pond, but sucking it up. So they were 5 or 6 pounders, and they could clearly see the eye and a shank of a hook on the bottom.
Well, I know friends actually that have caught on bear hooks over particle.
Yeah, I have too. Yeah, so it definitely works. But in that situation, are they just hoovering up the particle, or are they taking the hook?
Well, especially if the hook's on its own. Yeah, they're just taking the hook out of sight, surely.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Smell. Yes, possibly. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, what is their go-to?
We're only limited by what we can imagine, aren't we? You think
fascinating.
Step outside the comfort zone and give it a go.
It's fascinating, isn't it? And that's the thing with conditioning carp. we had Skeff, the guy who owns Ashmead, on a couple of podcasts ago, and he spoke about conditioning the carp at Ashmead.
Right.
He spoke about actually when Terry Hearn fished it, and he said he because obviously Ashmead is quite small and intimate, and people use very similar tactics, 3 or 4 ounce leads, dropping them in even bigger, dropping them in on the shelf, and he said 100% his observations have dictated that he's seen carp rise up off the bottom, and this actually happened to Terry. He described it on a previous podcast where Terry noticed a feet on the area and a fish was acting odd on the spot. Couldn't see really what was going on, but it wasn't until Terry got down the tree that the fish thought, "Whoa, there's a bit of noise," and bolted. But that fish had been hooked for half an hour and was just rocking from side to side with a rig in its mouth with, the conventional size lead. And what it did to Skepp's approach is it's led him, and he's been very successful. He catches plenty of carp, not just at Ashmead but all over, with half-ounce leads.
Yeah, I think it's what if you condition them to one style of fishing, then they become adept at sorting that out. I've seen something exactly the same as you just described Terry witnessed at Ashmead, where I watched a fish come in, I watched it feeding on my baited area, I watched it take something that I thought was absolutely bang on the spot. I then looked down from the tree I'm up and watched the line twitching and think, it's taken it. And the line's twitching again, I think it's definitely taken it. And the line from the rod tip was flicking. And then I look at the fish, crystal clear water, bright sunny day, I see its mouth going, I think, you've definitely got a hook in there. And I start climbing down the tree, and I go to the rod, I look out before I pick the rod up, and the fish is still there mouthing. I lift into the fish, and at that point it erupts and charges off up the lake. It was nailed all along. It was just doing its very, very utmost to get the hook out before I got to the rod. And you think, well, if that's happening like that, if I hadn't been able to see that, it would have eventually, presumably, it would have shook the hook out and then carried on feeding or swum off and thought, well, I ain't going down there again. So if you take that out into the lake situation where you can't see, that could be happening. But that is, I think, for me, one of the vitally important things of having a really, really sharp hook. Yeah. Because a very sharp hook, and I mentioned that I'm a great fan of the Korda Kamakura hooks, and I feel that they've really improved my catch results. But those hooks are super, super sharp. Now, yes, you have to change them frequently, and that point gets damaged. But if it goes out there perfectly, and a fish picks it up, and the fish pulls that into itself, it goes in a long way before the fish goes ow, and of course then it's very difficult for them to shoot back out again. If a blunt hook goes in, it only just goes in slightly to the surface. It's much easier for the fish to suck and blow very quickly and knock that hook out.
It's those 1 and 2 percentages, isn't it, that as an angler, that is something we can stack in our favour, and tackle and hook advancement has progressed massively since the old days.
And I think I remember chatting to a great old friend of mine, and he said, I keep getting fish feeding on my baited spots, and I'm not getting bites. And I said to him, how often do you change your hooks? And he went, not very often. And I looked at his rigs, and his hooks were blunt, Mike. You could pull them into your hand and just flick them out. They just weren't doing the job. And I just, it doesn't matter. I mentioned the Korda hooks, but there are other very sharp hooks out there too. Whatever hook you're using, make sure it is blisteringly, painfully sharp, and check it. And if it isn't, get rid of it, take it off. Don't be lazy, because I think that is one of the, we say, it doesn't matter what rods you've got, it doesn't matter what reels you've got, it doesn't matter what buzzers you've got. If the carp are on your spot and feeding and the bait's right, as long as you've got a sharp hook and strong string, you could hand line them in.
Yeah.
So that would be a great, often,
great bit of advice.
I always say to youngsters, they often, you get young guys come up to you at a show and say, what do I need to do? Or people speak to me at the fish farm, have you bought anything? And I haven't had much joy. I say, well, don't worry about your rods and reels. Use good quality bait and make sure your hooks are absolutely disgustingly sharp and your line's strong enough to land them, and then you've got every chance.
Yeah. Great advice, absolutely great advice. And one part when you mentioned there, bait actually has just led me on to the last thought of this podcast is what percentage, and it's very difficult because we're making this up as it's going to have to be an assumption, but I know you've got first-hand experience of seeing this with some of your observations over the years. What part of the carp's diet would you say is carnivorous in terms of the Ashmead carp? In a previous podcast, Gav spoke about eating rudd.
Okay, well, there's no question at all that carp eat fish. If you think that carp don't eat fish, you're missing a big trick. So I can think of several examples straight away where carp are clearly not just randomly, accidentally sucking up fish; they are hunting them down. Now, to take that to my first experience, I was working at a garden centre when I was in my teenage years, and we had these albino grass carp in this huge great koi pond, and these fish had been imported from Germany, and they were very, very expensive. Anyway, they were disappearing. And my boss said to me, "So have you noticed anything strange about the albino grass carp? They seem to be missing." Anyway, so these grass carp were probably 6-inch fish, funny looking things, albino colour and that sort of orangey eye that they got, a bit spooky looking. Anyway, I was stood looking at the tank one day, and there was 2 or 3 chagois in the pond, and these fish, the chagois, the brown koi, like a common carp, they were probably 18 to 20 pounders. And anyway, one day I was watching them, and the biggest one of these fish was doing some funny behaviour in the corner of the tank, and then as it spun round, it faced me, and there hanging out of its mouth was half a grass carp, and this grass carp's tail was wriggling, and this fish was clearly had just cornered it, and it was swallowing it. It was literally chewing it up live. And I thought, my God, that's the 30 quid. That's a 30 quid albino grass carp you've just eaten there. So I saw that and I thought, okay, that's really interesting. And I've subsequently seen it in my garden. And I've got a friend of mine that goes, really, really good angler. His name's Dan Gale. He'd be embarrassed for me mentioning it, but he catches fish of all species anywhere he goes. Brilliant angler. And Dan tells me stories of going perch fishing with live baits, little live rudd, and he catches a few rudd and he puts lip hooks one for his perch, and he showers a few maggots. He says that brings the rudd in, and then that brings the perch in, and then he said, well, you'd get a perch or two, and all of a sudden you'd get a bite, and it'd be a carp.
On a live bait?
On a live rudd. And he'd say, well, what's happening there? And I said to him, don't be silly, it's sitting on the bottom. He said, no, my float is skipping about, the rudd is still alive, and the carp are coming in and they're slurping down the rudd. Another guy I know very well, Sean Leonard, who does fish health checks. He does dissections of fish for the Environment Agency's requirement under Section 30 for a health check, and he says there are some populations of carp, and he says every time he dissects fish from that population, he will find rudd or roach in the gut. So that carp are clearly, they're opportunist feeders. They're omnivorous. They'll eat whatever they can get, and they'll eat whatever's the easiest food source. And if it's rudd or roach, then so be it. They're bullies.
Yeah, that's fascinating, Si. That's absolutely fascinating. Do you know what? It's great because also, if you read anything these days, it's very much, you're being moulded into a way of angling. And I think what we've tried to speak about here and talk about on this podcast is think about it a little bit outside the box. Think a little bit outside of the norm. Maybe do something different. Look at and understand carp behavior above anything else in terms of where you're going to invest a bit of time and understand how the carp operate. And as you say, a sharp hook is probably the only, and obviously a bait that a carp wants to eat, or only the 2 added extras you'll think about once you get an understanding of what the carp are looking for and how they feed. Really, it's just an insight. It's a fascinating insight. I could sit here for hours and hours and continue to pick your brains because it's amazing. And as humans, we just forget about all that quite quickly, don't we? We put it to the side, think, okay, let's go to the 3-ounce lead, the big boilie, and the Ronnie rig.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's no question that is a fantastic way of catching fish. It's called thousands and thousands and thousands of carp, but don't be afraid to chop and change. I mean, love him or hate him, but Ali Hamidi, who we'll all know, I remember him saying to me, what's all this disguising rigs? I don't reckon you should disguise them, but advertise them, using a bright red kicker or a bright yellow kicker. Okay. And of course I was thinking, well, why would you do that? But of course, it's like having a sight bob it's attracting the fish, isn't it?
Yeah.
And Ali's ballsy and brave enough to try stuff like that, and it works. So, we are limited by what's in our own imagination, really, and what I'm saying, I suppose, is don't be afraid to try something a bit different.
Yeah.
The first person that put on a bit of plastic pellet and lowered it into the margins of a lake and thought, well, it looks like a pellet, it's sort of shaped like a pellet, it behaves a bit like a pellet, but there's no way I'm going to catch a carp on it, and then it rattled off, must have thought, wow. And now look, I've caught a lot of carp on bits of plastic now. It's a it takes a bit getting your head round, but
Yeah.
once you've caught a few, you're away, and then you think, well, actually, the limitation's only in my own head, not the fish's.
That's it, and that you have hit the nail on the head. The limitation is in our angler's head, because you read so much that convinces you that some of these off the wall maybe aren't off the wall tactics when we talk about it like we have today are not so off the wall. And a friend of mine, while we wrap this up, a friend of mine, when you talk about sight feeding, he caught a carp out of breeze bait. It's a tactic he still uses today, and I can't get my head around it, but it's no different to a bit of plastic. He fishes a little pole float, one of those little bobbers.
Yep.
The little body, it looks like probably a 10mm boilie, really, a little bobbing pole float. It's bright orange.
Yeah.
It looks like a beacon of something, and he hair rigs those.
Yeah. Well, why would they not take it?
I don't know. Why
It's
would
the same, I'm fishing in a water now that's got crayfish in it, and I'm using bits of plastic.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah, and
But they work.
It works, and I say to him, "Once you catch it, mate, on the pole float." No.
Yeah, but again, it's limited by in your own head. I've caught in the past. I think probably the most obscure thing I've caught. I had a little plastic dog, a little tiny thing. It was about 1.5 centimetres long. A blue plastic dog. I've caught a carp on one of those.
Wow.
And also a Lego man's head.
Have you really?
Yeah, so there you go. And I've actually got a photograph of a carp with a Lego man's head hanging out of its mouth. But of course, that at the time, which was 25 years ago, seemed a bit off the wall. But now, of course, with everybody using plastic, it doesn't seem so bonkers after all. But it's a bit of yellow on the bottom. But I think the smiley face probably what swung it.
Brilliant. Well, that's another podcast I think we need to wrap up. If you haven't got something to get the old grey matter working in that recording, I'll be pleasantly surprised. So once again, Si, it's been a pleasure chatting to you, mate, and it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast, and I'm sure this will go down an absolute storm.
Thank you very much, Mike. Lovely to be here.
Cheers, mate. Thank you. Well, we're back. It's still hot, it's still sticky, it's still humid, but you've repositioned your rod in the zone.
Well, I say in the zone, in your zone. That was, I thought it was very wise and prudent of me to just move the rod down the bank about 20 yards and plop it out where you've had the last couple of fish, because there's obviously there's a few fish still there. The area I was fishing has gone a bit quiet, so we'll see what happens, I suppose.
Fingers crossed. Might get another take on tape. Before we do that, let's just not forget, when we walked round pre-podcast, you did bait that swim that you were fishing with a couple of handfuls of very wholesome looking bait, and the fish were all over it. And if I'm honest, I will give you a little bit of credit here, and I think I ruined your chances by catching one just at the bank, didn't I?
Well, probably didn't help, but I would have thought there would have been a few fish back in the area, and I'm sure if we stayed for another 2 or 3 hours, then we'd get takes on both rods or both areas, but we haven't got the luxury of that at the moment, so
no.
I thought I'd move it down here for the last bit of the podcast, and who knows, mate, who knows, there's fish going through there. You got ants all over your
Bloody hell.
hey,
They're everywhere.
Load of ants over your orange juice.
They've just gone up my pants.
Oh, mate, that's not good.
Shit.
Oh no.
Well done, mate. I just literally was about to
You're
put
about to take a mouthful of ants then.
That is absolute ants in pants territory. I've just got there. I've just sat in my pants, obviously, because it's so hot, and
Where are they coming?
they're everywhere.
Oh no.
God dear. Are they red or black?
No, they're. Oh, do you know what? They're that in between colour.
Oh, great.
I think they're black though. I think they're black.
Have I got to take my pants off?
Nah, you're all right, mate.
You sure? Was that a bit too much in terms of touching
Too
you
much,
with my
mate.
hair?
Too much, mate. Too much male stuff going on today.
Oh, that was a slight panic. Then I thought they were red ants, because a couple of areas on this lake,
Oh,
they're infested with red, aren't they?
yeah. Chris Edwards on the opening night, he bivered up on top of red ants, didn't he? He was, oh, mate, there can be a nightmare, but luckily around here it looks like they're black ants, so we're okay.
Yeah, we're safe. Oh,
But yeah, the Scotty, mate, never fails to disappoint. What a great interview that was. I absolutely loved it. Fantastic.
Do you know what? He's got still a massive draw in terms of the carp community, in terms of his knowledge. It's a breath of fresh air talking to Scotty, because we've spoken about it so many times on this podcast. Scotty doesn't push anything. He's not pushing products down your throat. He's not telling you how to do it. All he's doing is giving you an insight into his knowledge and experience of fish biology that can, I don't know, helps you think. I'm hoping that interview that that you've just listened to helps you think outside the box, because especially I learned lots of things that I didn't know before until I sat down with Scotty and recorded that. And one thing that just I don't know why I've never thought about this, is that, he spoke about carp being able to smell each other.
Yeah, I find that fascinating, and something that I can liken it to a few experiences back when I was younger, particularly with, you talk about sort of pheromones and stuff like that, don't you? Potentially of the carp giving off, especially when they've been caught, And I always remember in the winter months, I don't know if I mentioned it on this podcast or I've mentioned it before somewhere else. There's this little place called Golden Valley, which is a tiny little lake over in Bitton, down in Bristol. Unfortunately, I don't think there's any fish left there anymore. But back when I was fishing it, there's no otters, and it was only like, I don't know, if it was an acre, that would be generous. But there's a few little snag trees around the lake, and in the winter there was one particular snag tree that just held probably all the lake's stock of carp. And we used to fish. I used to go down for a day session, and you used to get a bite. You used to get a couple of fish from there. But what I worked out quite early on was that, so if you go there in the morning and you catch a fish straight away, happy days, you caught a fish. But that fish, if you photograph it and put it back where you're fishing, which is right next to the snag tree, that fish would invariably go back into the snag tree, and you wouldn't get a bite for the rest of the day. Whereas that same fish, if you put that fish back and just walked 10-15 yards down the bank and put it back into the other snag tree where invariably there wasn't any fish anyway, you'd put your rod back out to the same spot onto the snag tree where the fish were, and you'll get another bite within an hour or two. And you could probably get 2 or 3 bites like that as long as you put the fish back in the other snag.
And what do you think the reason is behind
that?
that?
I always remembered back from sort of match fishing days when you used to bream fish and chub fish. They used to say exactly the same. If you catch a bream or a chub, never put it back sort of into your swim. Always walk up the back or walk downstream and put the fish back, because that chub would be distressed and it'd go for your swim, and other fish would follow it or be distressed with it. So
I think it's giving off a distress pheromone or a smell.
Well, I think it's 2 things. One is a visual thing. If you return a fish and it sort of bolts off, if that fish bolts through a pack of fish, the other fish invariably 1 or 2 will follow that fish just out of curiosity. So it's taking fish away from your swim first and foremost.
Yeah.
But I always thought there was something to do with smell. And I was told it was a pheromone that is being released, distress hormone or something like that. And I never quite knew back then, but I knew that if I did that, if I put that fish back 10-15 yards down the bank into another snag tree, I'll continue getting bites. If I put it back in the same snag tree or released it where I was fishing, I wouldn't get a bite. So I can sort of link that back now from what Scotty said, and it's a fascinating area, and the fish are so perceptive in terms of the way they smell and taste. It stands to reason that they can smell each other, and like you said, like with dogs and all sorts, like they very quickly pick up scents, can't they?
Yeah, and another thing that again, sort of, you talk about scent there, and you talk about picking up how they smell and detect, and it links to obviously detecting attraction and bait, is where they actually, how they detect things, and there's obviously receptors on their
all over on their pecks, lateral line, lips, barbules. All over
I can
the body,
understand
really.
it, like in the lips, barbules, it's kind of near where food enters, but on their pecks was fascinating. And you see it, don't you? You see a fish, if you've done any underwater filming like we spoke about earlier on, or swim with, or even observation from the bank, when a fish sometimes comes into a spot, you see it wafting its pecks, almost like wafting the bait around the area. I just wonder, this is going to sound crazy now, but I wonder that if you've caught a carp numerous times and you've obviously got scar tissue in the mouth, and in terms of that must damage their receptors. So I wonder if they're then using their pecks to detect their food.
I think they use everything they've got at their disposal, wouldn't they? Particularly when you've got long range and close range sort of detection as well, and particularly when it gets close and it's more centred around the mouth. That's the final decision making of the carp, isn't it, to accept or to reject. But the fish will be utilising all things, and in the long range sort of detection, they're picking up taste buds and especially olfaction from long away, quite a way away from where the actual all food is, as long as they're in there's the higher concentrations of that food type to travel, and obviously when it comes out, when you put something in water, obviously it disperses and concentration levels sort of diffuse over time. But that's where sort of some products and that can help that and help buffer that. particularly interesting oils. Oils in essence should not be detected by fish, and I think in their raw state they're not, but it's what's diffused into them. And if you think of an oil travelling up from the lake bed and then travelling on
the surface,
to the
it's on its way
surface.
to the surface, isn't it?
Yeah, and then the wind pushing that oil, you get flat spots which go for 40 yards, don't you?
Yeah.
But in amongst that oil is diffused chemical compounds, whatever it may be, and they're slowly leaching out of the oil at very, very minute and small traces. But because the oil, and normally if it didn't have the oil, those little concentrations of food, it'd disperse in the water, and that'd be very localised around the baited area. But because you're using the oil as the vehicle, as the buffer, it's buffering the water, because water and oil obviously don't mix, and as that oil's travelling away from you, it is slowly leaching out into the water, and that's where you can pull fish in. I've seen it happen in matches and in competitive fishing, and particularly on higher stock venues. You're pulling fish in from sort of 30-40 yards away, and that's a huge advantage. So
because lots of people say, don't they? Lots of people say, well, why are you adding oil? Because oil water doesn't penetrate oil, and obviously fish are never going to be able to detect that. But as you say, it's such a good method. And it's been around for donkey's years in terms of coating your baits in oil or adding oil to stick mixes, etc. But as you know, oil's got an inherent desire just to get to the top of the water level, and it carries, if you put it on your bait, all those things it drags off your bait, so all the base mix ingredients and all the attractors that are being pulled up with it are obviously working, because you can't deny, like nobody, regardless whether the oil, if people believe oil is attractive or not, you cannot deny that adding oil to baits is attractive and very effective.
Well, I can say with sort of conviction that oil cannot be, in its pure form, it cannot be detected by carp. They just haven't got the facilities to or receptor sites to lock onto that, because it's not something needs to be soluble with water for it to be detectable for carp. And oil absolutely clearly isn't, but people misinterpret it because of what we just said, is that no oil is absolute. Most oils have something diffused or dissolved into it, which then has got the opportunity to leach out. I can think of many occasions with essential oils or whatever, you can still smell essential oils, and that's because there's things leaching out from essential oil.
Absolutely,
It's very similar in the underwater environment. So having that working for you helps you spread that food signal much further than just your soluble, like bait dips, or any other product, like Marmite, fish proteins, whatever it may be, which are instantly soluble in water, are absolutely brilliant and great, but they're very, very localized. So you put that into the water, invariably they sink and they leach off very quickly, but as they're leaching off, they're diffusing with the water, and the concentration's going down and down and down to the point where, when that food signal's 10-20 yards away from the bait, is it detectable? It's so low. Whereas if you've got oil working within your mix, that's coating everything, keeping those concentrations, then you've got a slow leach off, and obviously the fish can detect minute detections of food, and that's dragging them in. I've seen it so many times with your floater fishing with oil, seen it so many times with guys match fishing, Jake Taylor using the hot fish oil, particularly over sort of the matches up at Linear, done brilliantly well, and was dragging fish in from other people's swims, on the windward line, and you could see him showing on that windward line and then coming down onto the baited area. So
it must work, Mark, because another thing that I've always found with oil is it adds. There's many benefits to adding oil to your bait. If you're the type of person that discounts the attractive properties of ingredients leaching off the oil, that's fine. Put that to one side a minute. But when you think of what oil gives you, when a fish feeds on your bait out there and they're chewing that bait in their pharyngeal teeth, one thing that you definitely get, which is a really good indication you've got fish on the spot, is you get another patches of oil kind of pump. And you can almost tell that actually something's happening out there. So that's a great indicator for that. Well, that's another benefit, I think, of oil, and I think it's always been a big part of why I've added oil to especially in the summer. I mean, let's not forget this; it's a great tactic. And then thirdly, I do believe that oil coming up through the water, because it has this desperate desire to get to the surface, that almost must be like an Alka-Seltzer attraction in itself.
yeah.
Because so many sort of little blobs, but depending on how much you put in your mix, of course, how much you cook. But it must be kind of, and it must be kind of, there must be a noise associated with that, and definitely a visual of globules coming to the surface and racing to get to the top.
Yeah, well, I've done it in tanks before, and I've got video of it somewhere, where you mix oil and something heavy, like the old L090, which is quite a heavy product, covered in obviously very, very heavily salt based as the preservative. You could literally put a tiny bit of that in to a bottle, say, I don't know, quarter fill it, and then 3/4 fill it, then with oil, and shake it. And what will happen is you get like a frog spawn effect. You get the oil will be coated in this
Heavy liquid.
Raining. It is raining. It's nice, very refreshing.
What the?
So you get the oil that's coated in this heavy liquid, but the oil will be just about, depending on the droplet size, enough to rise slowly for the water level. The oil droplet would then disperse on the top, giving you that lovely flat spot, and then that soluble lump of L030 or another heavy protein would fall down through the water column, dissolving on its way down.
Yeah, so it's up and down.
Up and down, and that was just hugely attractive. And that's what's going on with oils as well. You won't, some of the stuff that's coated with the oil you won't see physically to the eye, but I promise you there's lots going on there. And any of those fish coming over the spot high up, and it's a tactic that I used over in Gigantica quite a lot, and accepted that I was going to catch a few bream because of it, because as Simon rightly says, the taste receptors for carp, bream, tench even, they're all very similar, and what's attractive for one is going to be attracted for the other. But what it meant was, I knew that Gigantica was a 24, 26 foot average, and I knew that those fish spent most of their time at 17, 18, 19, 20 foot, say, off the bottom, so in the top sort of.
That's why his digs at certain times were so effective on them, weren't they?
But they spent a hell of a lot of time there, and they only travel down to that deep water at certain points in the night or the morning to feed. And I thought it was purely to feed. They're much more comfortable up in those upper layers towards the surface of the lake. So I knew that during the day, when there was no bites at that time of year when we went over there, that oil was going to be my ace card, because I was putting loads of oil onto the baits, and that would, through the day, pepper that message up through the upper layers, and any fish passing would be no doubt that there was food down there.
Yeah.
And then when it came to that feeding time, they would descend on you, and I was quite successful doing that over there, and caught quite a few fish, and I put it down to the oil.
Another thing that you did in Gigantica, which I think you've spoken about before, and it's a massively underused tactic, but I've just remembered it because Scotty talks about carp eating swan mussels.
Yes.
You've done very, very well, and in the UK actually, and it takes some doing, and that's why I think it puts a lot of anglers off for starters. I haven't done it because, blimey, I haven't got time. I'm usually in and out, but you love being in the water, as we discussed, and you've done well, haven't you? And this must be to sound and noise, mashing up zebra mussels that you've collected in the margins in your mix, haven't you?
Absolutely, yeah. Like going over to Gigantica for the first time, I didn't know anything about the lake, so you try and learn as much as you can. But one of the first things when you arrive is you think, right, I need to try and do something a little bit different here, because the guy who's been before me in this swim, in my case it was the Alamo, that was the first swim I drew, has probably put out better boilies, and I think he caught a couple of fish, like and I'm about to go in and probably do exactly the same, and the guy before that and the guy after me is going to do the same. So straight away, when you're on a new venue, the first thing I like to do is just to look in the water, into the edge, and see what's abundant. And to my surprise and delight, over there was absolutely thousands of zebra mussels.
Yeah.
And when I plumbed out into the weed, I was bringing back weed with tiny little zebra mussels on. So I knew that straight away these fish are very dependent on zebras. And round the banks of Gigantica there was loads of snags. I think they've all been taken out now, which is obviously very good fishery management. But at the time when I was fishing there was literally, on the branches that were in the water, I can only describe them as kebab style branches full of zebras. And what I mean is there were zebras that encrusted the branches. These branches are only sort of 10 mil thick.
Right.
But there were zebras upon zebras upon zebras upon zebras over many, many years. So you had like stalagmites of zebras that go down. So I got my chest waders on. I thought, I know exactly what I'm going to do here. I got into the water, had a life jacket on, because life jacket's in there, so I was very safe. And I literally started wading up and down the margins, snapping off these branches and putting them into a bucket, And no word of a lie, I had a bucket full in 10 minutes.
You had about 4 or 5 kilos of these things, didn't you, in a black bucket? I remember seeing them.
Easily, yep. So I put that as part of my baiting strategy. What I'll do, literally get a rubber glove on. So I borrowed like a marigold glove to protect.
You mean you don't carry rubber gloves?
No, unfortunately, I didn't go over there with a rubber glove. No. So just nicked a glove from the chef over there.
I didn't believe it. I mean,
and literally, like you get your stick and you'd run your hand down them like a kebab, and just like they'd all come off into a bucket, and there was thousands of them, thousands. And then what I get then is, well, first of all, I get my waders on, and I'd literally jump in 2 foots in the buckets are quite big because they're for putting water on fish.
Yeah.
But I'd like jump in the bucket and smash up by the foot. But then I found like a massive rock, quite a long. And I used to put a rock in and just do the same. But you just smash up. I'd smash over half the mussels up into a pulp, and the inside of a zebra mussel, I've mentioned before, is quite pearlescent.
Yeah.
So it's like a very visual thing.
Yeah.
You know, when carps crush those zebra mussels up, when they spit them out, they flash on the bottom. You know, they're very. I've talked about this before, but it was what a mix. You just had suddenly loads and loads of zebras, and then I'd add my boilies, crushed boilies to it, and smash them up. Smash some of them up, some of them whole, and you're just left with a soup. And that, putting those bits, and I went in quite heavy because I was putting in so much natural food, and I was fishing out about sort of 100 yards or whatever. But my Christ, over the course of a week, I think I had 10 takes and caught 8, which, is you're not setting the world alight, but at that time of year, November, most people were getting a couple of bites a week. And they were big fish. But I managed, in my first session, to catch quite a few and lost a couple, unfortunately. But that certainly flipped the switch for them.
Well, it's exactly what we said when we spoke about big baits. That is exactly an out-of-the-box thought, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like when you talk about big baits and talk about thinking outside the box and not following the norm, or getting sheeped by what you read in the magazines as the kind of standard 8 to 10 inch hook link and the standard setup and boilie or particle. It's like you're thinking outside the box there with an unusual mix, but clearly it's you only got to look at it. When you sent me some pictures, it was never going to fail. Yeah,
you just look at it, you think there's no way the fish aren't going to eat this, and that was echoed in the fish that I was catching. You catch some of them would be at like early hours of the morning, so you'd retain them for an hour just until the light was a bit better for a photo.
Yeah.
And you'd look in the sling, and there were just loads and loads. I've got pictures of these fish venting the shells at home, just venting loads of these tiny shells, and boilie as well.
Yeah.
And interestingly, I was putting tiger nuts in with a mix, and some of the fish, particularly some of the commons, were only venting zebra mussel shells.
Yeah.
And tiger nut chopped tiger nuts.
Really?
Yeah, only those two, but no boilies. And then some fish would just vent boilies and zebra mussels.
So clearly there's a preference going on, isn't there, when they're feeding as well? And like Simon spoke about, they can decipher what they want in their mouth cavity quickly, and decide actually they don't want that or they want that, and it's fascinating. It definitely, some carp are more prone to getting caught on particles. It might be a preference, and others are definitely boilie eaters.
It's really interesting seeing that in the slings after. Some fish would just vent the zebra mussels and tigers. Others were just purely on the boilies and a bit of zebra mussel as well. But they all loved the zebras. That was all going in, and in the end, I fished a boilie tipped off with a zebra mussel.
Did you?
Yeah.
Amazing.
So you can literally get a bait drill, and like I should have, and I have done it over there, but I didn't catch. But I should have just fished zebra mussels on the hairs, because you can get some real big ones that are literally like getting on for like 15-20 minutes.
I'd love to have seen that.
Yeah, but what I did do was sort of a halfway house. I had a boilie, and I was then drilling out a zebra, and then putting the hair through it, and then obviously fastening it off.
Did you catch that?
Yeah, I caught a couple like that. Yeah.
You sneaky! They never told me that.
Well, it's because the boilie was there. It was a bit. What did they take? What was they going for? The boilie or the zebra, or both? But I fully committed. I have fully committed on a hair on one rod, but I never caught on it. But I just think it's just, what it's like when you put 3 rods out in the swim. Sometimes it's always the one rod that's going, because that's where they're coming in from that direction, and the right hand rod, which is almost, you almost might as well wind it in sometimes, aren't you, on some venues?
I think I fish better with one rod. Genuinely fish better with one rod.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. I think it makes you think, doesn't it, where you're positioning, where you're putting it, and
Yeah.
I like 2 rods, to be fair, 2 rods, but 3 rods. Oh,
I can't remember last time I fished 3.
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it?
I never fish 3. Never fish. Even when I can, I just don't. It's just it just hinders my thought process. It's with short sessions as well, and you're trying to get things done before the light fade. I don't know. I just don't like it.
Yeah, you're compromising, aren't you, as well? Invariably, that third
always an
rod
afterthought.
It's an afterthought, and it's another line in the water, isn't it? At the end of the day.
Yeah. Well, we better stop, Mark. We better stop. It's I think we've been waffling on another half an hour, and I think this is probably going to be our longest podcast, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
But
well,
I can't.
It's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. No, I don't know. I think I'll be interested to hear from the guys listening to this. If you like the longer form ones, or if you like them a bit more short and punchy, you know, we're quite happy to do either. To be fair, aren't we?
Yeah, and I think because we only do it once a month, the feedback I've received so far is that people are like more. You know, give us a bit more. So hopefully the longer ones sort of compensate for us for the frequency.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we talked about trying to do them every other week, weren't we? Like, you know, but it's just difficult to try and find relevant people, and it puts pressure on you, doesn't it? And we want to make sure when it does come out, hopefully it is good content and it's of interest.
Yeah, and it gets the grey matter sort of whirring, and we had some amazing feedback. So thank you ever so much from the last podcast where Mark Walsdenham talks about sort of rudd eating carp and and Ashmead and the Redmire restoration, and that seemed to have gone down a storm. So and it's been again listened to all over the world. So we can see where they're being downloaded, and clearly Mark and his sort of passion for angling hit a note with a lot of anglers. So again, massive thanks again to Mark, of course, for agreeing to come onto the podcast, but to all the listeners that gave us a glowing review. And we've once again had some great reviews on iTunes, and please keep them coming, because it really does help keep the rankings up on iTunes. And the reviews are really nice to read. You know, it's really nice and pleasant to hear that people just enjoy our ramblings.
Yeah, and that's all we've got. Our feedback is basically through the iTunes. We look at all the reviews, and we're very, very thankful of them. But you can really help us out just by going over and just leaving a very simple review. If you like us, brilliant. If you don't, then that's fine as well.
Absolutely.
But,
and send us any you know, if you want to contact us on Facebook Messenger, on Instagram, or however you want to contact us to say whether it's enjoyable, indifferent, or actually you've just had enough of our rambles, then please do that too. Yeah, any questions you want us to cover, get in touch. Happy to pick up some questions from our listeners. And if you think it's working or not working, we'd love to hear from you. Brilliant. Well, I think you need to probably look to get home and catch up on a bit more sleep, since your Ibiza excursion is still ticking it at you. Another good night's sleep tonight, and I think I'll be back in the game. Back in the game? Well, back in the game as much as I can. It's Friday tomorrow, so I'm looking forward to a nice... Fancy going out for a beer? Oh, no. I knew you'd say no. I knew you'd say no. Anything worse at the moment. I knew you'd say no. Not even a cold one right now. If it was on ice, maybe a cider. Do you know what? A cider. Maybe a cider, because... It'd slowly twist your arm, yeah? Yeah, ciders are... not that I've got back into cider, but I've had a couple over the last year or two, and they've always been quite pleasant, especially when they're cold with loads of ice. Yeah, you can't beat it, can you? Well, I hope some of our listeners are doing just that now, so let's wrap this up and get out of this sun. Yeah, mate, I'm melting. Gonna go for a swim? Yeah, I'm going to wind that rod in now. I'm going to get in the lake and have a little swim before I go in. Oh, good stuff. Cool. All right, guys, well, thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you next month.